Hello everyone, welcome to another amazing video. If you enjoy the content, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming parts and new videos. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's video. Are you ready? Let's go.
His thoughts are before us. This is his dream. He has not invented anything. Everything is before his eyes as if it were yesterday. But what was yesterday? We are about to see. Our hero was a knight. He fought someone. He was having fun because he found pleasure in the battle. Mocking the enemy because he was very slow, but it was his negligence that ruined him. Negligence was always his problem. He just wanted to play because he was bored. His armor began to crumble after the blow, which was very frustrating because his armor was very valuable. So he immediately leaped towards the serpent, mocking and asking it to try to bite him. Anger was also his problem. He would get enraged very easily. That's why at that moment he continued to strike the serpent with his fists. It was not in his character. He just liked the feeling when his strength increased. That's what he liked. He grabbed his sword, saying that what he liked the most was fencing, and began to strike the serpent. But he pointed out that to be more precise, he liked fencing with magic. Meanwhile, he ended up feeling something on his foot and began to fall. As he fell, he wondered how this was possible. It seemed like he was fainting and tried to say he had a secret. But before he finished speaking, everything went dark. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw a woman in front of him. Where did she come from? He asked. He saw that she was a beautiful woman, and began to wonder if he really had an admirer following him all along. But he was too exhausted for that because of his previous fight. The woman approached him and kissed him on his forehead. He liked it, for she had a scent of flowers. As soon as he looked at her better, he saw that she had incredible beauty. He wonders if she had been there all the time admiring him. He could not help himself, so they approached. He wanted to kiss her, but at that moment he realized that he was just a baby. Then he started to cry. His mother thought he wanted to eat something, but in fact, he was crying because he had reincarnated again. Unlike other people, he is reborn with each death and thus to infinity. But still it was worth eating after all. Why be sad? Why bother? It was his 101st birth. Before Arel's eyes, his past life began to fly by. His wife as a student, his life as a knight, even as a samurai, if his memory served correctly. But his first life was in Korea. That very life was during the Joseon era, a whirlwind of endless interviews and job searches, the same tedious life that no one could have dreamed of, with an equally tedious end, when it was abruptly cut short by being hit by a car. He was reborn for the first time. Upon waking, he found himself in the body of a baby in a completely unknown family. Everything was strange. It was from that moment that he began to be reborn repeatedly, astonishingly, in different worlds and eras. But Arel could boast, for he lived all kinds of lives and in all sorts of ways. Thanks to this, he was simply accustomed to this situation and went with the flow. The rebirth that many dream of became commonplace for him. However, while drinking his milk, he wondered where he had arrived this time. After all, judging by the environment he was in, it seemed to be somewhere in the Middle Ages. It was unlikely that he was back on Earth, nor was it even logical for a rebirth. This meant that he had simply been reborn in another world, but he was not complaining, for he liked the other worlds, as they were usually much more comfortable. He was even lucky, as it seemed he had been born into wealth. There were even many companions. What this means is that he came from a noble family, and his mother loved him very much. Arel did not understand their language at first, but after a while, he got used to it. Of course, it was a new world and a new language for him. It often happens that one does not understand much at the beginning when in a new world. But the warm hands, the kind look of total love, that speaks for itself because his mother really loves him. Having changed hands 100 times, he can tell exactly which ones gave birth out of a sense of duty, and which did not. As bitter as it may seem, there were times when he was abandoned after birth or forced to repay the life that had been given to him. However, he had a good feeling about this life. He heard one of the maids addressing his mother. The maid was saying that his mother was tired, so she offered to take care of the young prince. At that moment, he realized he was a prince. His mother looked at her and asked if people would even recognize this baby as a prince. The maid said that of course she did not think so, but Levana asked Chena to answer honestly since they were alone in the room. She asked if she also thought ill of her son. Levana says that not long ago she was a servant like her. Arel soon realizes that this is why his mother seemed sad. Levana explains that he is called a prince because he has the king's blood, but in truth, he was far from a life of glory. Levana continues to say that besides the king's blood, there was also her blood, which was merely that of a commoner. She thinks that in the future, Arel might blame her for this. China immediately disagrees, saying that would have no chance of happening. Levana continues to say that, even being a prince and having imperial blood, his fate would certainly not be easy. It would have been easier if her son were not a prince at all. She looked at Arel and asked for his forgiveness. She knew what the other noble families said about her and her son. It was because of her that Arel had no right to inherit the throne. She blamed herself. But Arel did everything, so that his hand would wipe the tears from his mother's face. She immediately regained her composure, as she realized that her son probably understood something and had tried to comfort her. Chena agreed with her smiling. Arel then tried to show with his whole appearance that she did not need to be sad because he was fine. Arel did not care if he would inherit the throne, let alone if he would have followers, as the life of a prince was already lucky for him. He would simply ignore all kinds of sticky nobles who would bother him in the future. And the imperial family will not be able to control him because the life of a prince promises to be busy. His 101st life in his new world is a dream. Such is the life of the emperor's son, as well as of former servants, where the mixed bloods have a life that could be quite pleasant. He could almost every day have fun with women and have absolutely everything that his soul desired. And with the emperor's blood, then he would have more or less comfortable conditions guaranteed. He dreamed of eternal travels, hunts, but all the while he was lying in his bed, making sounds and cheering up his mother. His mother thinks Arel seemed happy, carefree, but still she was a little sad. If only she had the power to protect him from all this, it would be much better. Arel heard these words of power and thought. He understood the reason for this concern, for not having the right to the throne was a weakness. No one needs you if you are weak. No one will stand up for you. No one will even look for a way to get rid of you. However, he believed that it was not worth worrying about, for the son of his new mother had already lived many lives as a warrior. 3 months later, while Arel slept, his mother admired him, enchanted by his beauty. She noticed that he had hair color just like hers, and thought that if only he had the father's hair color it would be easier. However, one of the maids comes up to her and says that the lady's carriage had already arrived. Levana replied that she was already on her way. She kissed her son and told him not to miss her, as she would be back soon. As soon as everyone left, Arel simply wakes up and thinks that his act of pretending to sleep was quite convincing. Arel made a noise, but then became quiet. He hoped that the nanny wasn't rushing over to him, because there hadn't been a second of peace since he was a baby. Everyone kept an eye on him. But while he was alone, he decided to take the opportunity to do something. His future depended on it since he is a prince only in name. He even hoped that the emperor's blood contained some kind of ancestral power. After all, if that were the case, he would have to learn to use it. He decided to concentrate and gather all his power. He understood that the world is ruled only by the strongest. Only when you are strong, no one dares to oppose you. At least Arel had the opportunity to use the experience of the previous 100 lives, because even in the body of a baby, he could accumulate strength. This meant only that the power was available. He remembered his 30th life. It meant that he could use the techniques of chance Qigong. This method allows him to train both his innate QI and his original QI at the same time. He should also try practicing skills from his other lives simultaneously, even in the body of a child. No one would even think that a child of this age could train. So once Arel perfects this technique, by the age of 10, he would have the internal Qi equivalent to 60 years, and when he turns 20, he would have the Qi equivalent to 180 years. Arel continues focused on the energy, which would be the only way to train, but it's just in the initial stages. After he gets through this, he would even be able to train while the nanny holds him in her arms. Then, he decided to accelerate the flow throughout his entire body to gather all the energy together. He could already feel the Qi all over his body, but his head was really throbbing, so he decided to release all the energy. With this, he ended up screaming. His nanny came running to check if he was all right, but he was already pretending to sleep when she arrived. She sees everything is fine and is confused because she heard something. Chena wonders if it's time to change diapers. Arel just wanted her to step back and not touch him. After all, even a small touch would make all the stored energy disappear. Arel prayed that this would not happen. It was at this moment that his prayers were answered. The nanny saw that everything was in order and stepped back, thinking he was probably having nightmares. As soon as she left, Arel felt like a power plant. He thought he held the amplification just for a moment, but his body was burning. Arel thinks that fever is deadly for babies. He hoped he could endure everything being just a baby, but the thought that it was better to die than to live at someone's disposal kept him persevering. He started to accumulate as much energy as he could, continued his work, as it was also to be able to lead a prosperous life. At this point, even the maid heard everything. She ran to his room thinking something had happened. But Errol was sweating profusely. Chaina was confused, since a few minutes ago he was sleeping very well. Then Chaina decided to prepare a bath with herbs and then bathe him. On the other hand, when Errol saw that Chaina had gone to prepare the bath, he abruptly stood up and his eyes shone with happiness because everything was working. He had achieved the hyper-evolution prefrontal lobe. The maid came running back to pick him up, asking how he was. Chaina saw that Errol was happy, and she felt relieved. Errol thinks his nanny has no affinity with mana. Now with his new technique to detect and absorb mana from the atmosphere, in other words, now Errol could easily accumulate it in his body, and didn't need to do anything for it, as he grew stronger even when just eating or sleeping. He couldn't contain a smile on his face, and everything exploded in happiness after all. He could already accumulate so much energy in 3 years that would be comparable to most adults in power. And when he turned 10, it was hard even to imagine. He was sure that at most 10 people in this world could defeat him. At that moment, the maid noticed something strange. A sound coming from above, however, distracted again. Realized that Errol had this wonderful smile on his face. Errol thought he would become stronger and stronger, so that soon he could live like a king. He couldn't wait for that day to come as soon as possible. It had been exactly 5 months since he was born. Thanks to the mana absorption technique, his physical capabilities would increase significantly, and his inner energy would already be bubbling faster than all his peers. After all, everyone should know that mana is automatically collected. Even though now he was crawling on the ground, he still did not stop trying. Because soon, surely his power would exceed the available and even floating would be possible. However, at that point, for some reason, he started to rise from the mat. But it was just his mother who picked him up in her arms. She brought him a toy that he certainly did not expect to see. She gave him a rattle, however. He showed no reaction at all. But realizing his mother's disappointment, he immediately started to play with it. Even though he appeared to be having fun, inside he felt a shame about what he was doing. The maid and his mother laughed, because their baby seemed so happy. Lavana, all happy, says she will play a lot with Errol. Chaina says his reactions are great. His mother praised him, saying he was beautiful, and asking who he took after. Errol liked that. He loved being praised and thinks he took after her. However, he thinks that being loved is a luxury, one that he will enjoy and cherish this time. The expression on Errol's face immediately changed. His mother could not understand what he wanted. However, Errol wanted just one thing. He wanted to eat. Tears began to flow from his eyes. He tried to show this with his entire appearance. Immediately, the nanny guessed that Errol was hungry. Errol was happy and said that his nanny was the best. Then, at that moment, they gave him milk while our hero was busy drinking milk. The conversation was about the financial situation. Despite the prince needing to be well fed, the funds had been dwindling since yesterday. There was nothing that the lady could do about it, because the budget for the maintenance of the mansion had been severely cut this year. Even raising a child was difficult. Errol remembered hearing such conversations from the maids not too long ago. He had heard that they would have to make significant savings on Lady Lavana's meals. They had no other choice. Errol couldn't believe it, because he thought that this kind of conversation definitely wasn't serious. But Lady Lavana maintained a positive line. She said that even though they had to be thankful, as they were not starving. Chaina says that at least they hadn't reduced the number of soldiers. Errol, hearing this, wonders if it's really that bad. Because his mother is really a simple concubine, she didn't even have power or status, even taking into account the fact that she had given birth to a prince. He wasn't even a prince. Something needed to be done. Otherwise, something bad would certainly happen to the prince. Errol couldn't believe it, because he thought that, being a prince, it would not be allowed for him to die in infancy. Lavana had not been given the opportunity to see the king in person. She said that it's simply impossible because he is too busy. Errol began to understand. Now everything was clear to him, where his mother was constantly going in a carriage. She wanted an audience with the king, and it seems that she was unsuccessful. But no matter how cruel the ruler was, it's unacceptable to behave this way with the mother of his children. Why does he do this to his mother? Because she already has enough abuse from the nobles. What to do? Because even if the king was originally indifferent to her, such an attitude is simply inadmissible. Errol started to cry, which allowed the nanny to hand him over to his mother's arms. He really wanted to help her. Even being a child, he knew he could do something. Not much occurred to him, but he had to think of something. All he had to do was get through this winter, because in truth, it all boiled down to a lack of money for all their needs. And in winter there was a new expense, such as heating. He thought, How could he help after all? What exactly could he do? He realized there was still one thing. He thought about the fact that if coal is a carbon structure like diamonds, and he noticed that Mom wore precious stones, then in this world they are also very valuable. That is, if he didn't have money, he could at least get valuable stones. However, his legs were too short for him to get out of his bed. He realized he had to think of something else. Arl thought that with all the amount of mana he had, he was capable of freeing himself. Now he could fly to his destination. He realized that no one used coal much anyway, and most importantly for him at this moment, there was plenty in the fireplace. He wanted to transform that pile, so he decided to hurry, because he needed to transform it into diamonds while everyone was asleep. Errol created the necessary temperature and pressure to transform coal into diamond. He did not hesitate to spend all the mana. He generated more and more of his inner energy, knowing that if it worked, his mother would be happy. All he wanted was to see his mother smile and be happy in her life. At this point, the entire chimney was in smoke. Errol was successful. He obtained such a beautiful and shiny diamond. He was sure that was it. The only thing left was to find a way to deliver it. He was happy that he managed then. In the morning when Chena came to his room, she realized that Arl was not in his bed. She couldn't understand how he got out of his bed. The bed is too high. There's no way he could have gotten out. Chena wondered if Errol really spent that whole cold night on the floor. She picked him up in her arms and also realized he was very dirty. Chena noticed the place was all messy. The fireplace was a mess. The carpet as well. She immediately imagined that he had been playing all night. Chena says he can no longer stay on the cold floor. Arl thought that there was no need to worry. After all, it was Prince Errol they were talking about. The nanny noticed that Errol was holding something in his mouth. She asked what he had in his mouth and said he couldn't just put anything in his mouth. However, as soon as Errol opened his mouth, she saw it was a diamond. She didn't know where he had found it, and wondered if it had been on the floor. Chena couldn't understand how the diamond could be there. She herself takes care of the treasury, and there was nothing missing. Moreover, there was not even a diamond listed. Chena hugs Errol and thanks him. Errol thinks his hand would also be very happy with this. After this moment, cars with supplies flooded the palace. They received enough wood to survive this winter, general provisions. That diamond was precisely at the most favorable price to cover 5 years of living expenses. Levana asks if they did the right thing, and if it belonged to someone. Chena says that simply could not be, since the castle had been built almost 100 years before Lady Levana settled in. Everyone thought it was a gift from God, sent from heaven for their prince. The mother was very happy because she believed that it was, indeed, a gift from God. Errol thinks and asks her to wait until he grows up, that he would surely free her from all her worries. He imagined himself as an adult, standing before his mother, but at that moment he was too young. He promises that he would show to the king and everyone else the existence of Errol. Thanks to all this, the palace kept the fireplace warm throughout the winter. Lady Levana could hardly eat alone from so much food. Levana asked about the food for the servants, but Chena told her not to think about anything, as she just needed to feed herself freely. Everyone was happy. The maids were hired again. But most importantly, Arl's mother stopped being sad. She was always beautiful, always smiling. That winter was the coldest of all, but they went through it in warmth and comfort. A year later, Chena was choosing an outfit for Errol. Levana says they were good, but Mommy still chose clothes of a more rigid nature. Errol hardly liked anything, and generally did not like changing clothes after all. What kind of holiday was approaching? But it left him so tired. Errol needed to rest, so he thought how to make a request worthy of a prince. Then he threw himself on the floor and started to cry. Chena noticed this and thought he was sleepy, so immediately he was calmed, changed, and put to bed. Arl was happy that everyone was finally moving away from him, so he could rest. On the other hand, the nanny was happy because today was the day they could officially introduce to everyone the prince of the imperial family, as he was officially recognized as a member of the royal family. Errol heard this and was shocked. Could it really be happening? Levana was very happy, for he had grown up a year without a single problem. But Lady Levana was worried. She says Arl could be a prince only in name, but royal blood runs in his veins. She wonders if the king would miss his son's birthday. Chena says she thinks the king was not ignoring Arl. He was just waiting for the right time. Since bad things can happen to newborns, so he started to reassure her because they usually avoid their newborns. Errol was even more shocked, as his birthday was really so close. Were everyone preparing for a very big banquet for him? Miss Levana, on the other hand, was very happy, as her son would officially become part of the royal family. She was happy because the empire's laws were on her son's side. Arl thought that was why his mother was happier than usual. However, he wondered if all the other aristocrats would attend this banquet. He even wished to finally see his father, whom he had not seen since his birth. At the banquet, there was an incredible number of aristocrats, as well as people who did services. Errol was incredibly curious to know how much money was spent on all this. Despite everything, everyone was incredibly well dressed. Does everyone dress like this for banquets? China says it's not that Errol didn't like all this, but he was a bit confused by the new faces, because the prince had never seen so many people before. His mother began to calm him, saying that everything was fine, as he was the most important there. But the aristocrats had already started looking at him askance, yet Errol paid no attention to them, as he needed no one. And where was the emperor, his father? He just wanted to look into his shameless eyes. Errol wanted to use this banquet to make a strong impression of his existence on the king. These people arrived, the imperial family. Errol immediately began tugging on his mother's dress, asking her with all his manner if it really was the reigning empress and the children, beside and especially the eldest. Why was everyone so serious? Because everyone passed by his mother, as if she didn't exist. But despite all this, Errol's mother was not offended by their pedantic behavior. She asked Errol if something was bothering him or not, because it would soon be over, she promised. While Errol's mother smiled, he noticed that her gaze was going somewhere. She was staring at Errol's father, who exuded an incredible energy. After all, he was just passing by, and all the chatty nobles and servants immediately fell silent. Everyone bowed their heads before him. After all, even Errol felt the power emanating from him on the level of masters. Errol couldn't understand whether his father was looking at him or his mother. He regretted very much that rebirth did not give him the ability to read other people's thoughts. How good it would be if Errol knew what everyone else was thinking. After a while, everyone began to give him gifts. All congratulated him, and it was a great honor for everyone to see him. When it came time for the imperial family to congratulate him, they did not hesitate to openly express their attitude towards Errol and his mother. All this attitude did not leave Errol at ease. He tried to break free from his mother's hands to attack these people properly. How dare they treat her like this? He realized that absolutely everyone there was equally unpleasant and rotten inside. He wondered if he really should burst their ears with his super cry. But Errol did not want to embarrass his mother. He decided that the best way now was to remain nice. After all, everyone around was hypocritical at that moment, unfortunately. He just wanted to get out as soon as possible. He thought of falling asleep in his mother's arms. But at that moment, while he wanted to sleep, he realized that he was probably in front of one of the daughters of one of the emperor's concubines. Errol thought she was a lady, even so young. However, they had already left when the banquet came to an end. Errol, along with his mother, were able to breathe a sigh of relief in unison. But it wasn't over there, because his mother was approached by the empress herself. She says it's been a while. Levana responds asking if Elia was okay. Elia responds that yes, everything was fine, thanks to her son, the heir to the throne, because he was always there. Arel did not like to see the empress boasting about her son, but that was exactly what was expected of the empress. Despite all this, the empress began to say that Arel was very sweet and very much like his mother. Arel saw nothing good in this, because surely it was she who had a hand in their difficult situation. Even if they didn't care, the castle's funding would not have been reduced so drastically, to the point where they had to use knights to chop wood, and their clothes looked like they were sewn by servants from rags and scraps. The empress says to Levana to enjoy all her time with Errol. Levana thanks her and says she will. But as she left, she smiled mockingly. At that moment, Levana saw someone she definitely did not expect to see. She saw the emperor himself. He said it had been a long time and asked if something was wrong, and if she was accustomed to the castle, but one could say that Arel's mother lied, saying that thanks to his majesty everything was going well. Arel was indignant, and thought everything was out of the ordinary. Arel only wished for one thing, that the emperor would give them money. Errol began to cry a lot, which made the emperor ask to hold his son, whom he had not seen for a year. The emperor did not understand why Errol was not crying, since his other children always cried non-stop upon seeing his face. Errol, however, after hearing this, thought that if he should just smile, because a man who does not melt at the smile of his son cannot be called a father. Surely the emperor liked him, after all. Up to then, he had not been afraid of him. Errol began making a strange movement to make the emperor put him down, thinking he could walk. But Levana said he still couldn't walk. She mentioned he was only 1 year old, but at that moment, Errol simply stood up and walked. Errol understood he was the center of attention at that moment and had to show all he could do. Everyone was ecstatic because finally, their little one had taken his first steps. This even caught the emperor's interest, who noticed Errol was trying to show something to him. In turn, Errol understood there was still a bit to be shown because he would demonstrate he was definitely different from other children. He would do this in front of everyone. After all, he is Prince Errol himself. However, as soon as he reached the table and tried to lean on it, the whole table with the products simply fell and began to collapse onto the tablecloth, along with the drinks. His mother and the emperor were very worried because all the products began not only to fall to the ground, but also to break and spread. But it was okay because it was exactly as it should be. Everyone was so excited about the prince's first steps that no one would notice that this was a well-planned strategy. He chose the right moment because it was exactly what he wanted, and also for a shocking effect. He just needed to pick up and scream. After all, he is a child. While lying on the ground, he was picked up by the emperor, who asked to see him. He saw that Errol was just dirty with wine, but nothing more. He was intact, and also needed to be changed. Chena already wanted to take him from the emperor, but he said it was okay. The emperor had torn off his outer clothes, and noticed the terrible clothes that Errol was wearing underneath. Chena was shocked, because when she changed Errol, the clothes were good. Everyone began to notice, and started to speak ill, and that such clothing was unworthy of a prince. However, the emperor angrily ordered everyone to be silent. The emperor questions what kind of life Errol was leading, to live in such poor conditions. Errol celebrates because this was his plan. In fact, that morning while the nanny was preparing Errol's clothes, he concentrated all his energy and began to stretch the fabric as hard as he could. Then he had to give it a sloppy appearance, which certainly was not difficult. The fabric was so fragile that he could tear it with his hands. He made shreds in the clothes just by rubbing a little. Behind the fancy clothes lay an uncomfortable truth. He was able to reveal what was hidden. Then the emperor asked Errol's mother if she would not explain how this could have happened, if it was so hard to maintain status. Errol's mother was very worried. Then the emperor did not question her, there was no point. He turned to his trusted man, Yennefer, and asked how much money was allocated for the maintenance of the concubines' castles, and what was his order. Yennefer said that he had given an excellent order to distribute the budget equally, and everything was done according to the order. The emperor could not understand the meaning of the word, equally. Because nothing was correct, he also asked to bring the budget report as soon as possible. Errol looked at this and understood that, although his party had turned into an interrogation, it would be a good chance to know what kind of person his father was. Errol's mother said it was all her fault, but he asked for his little one back. However, it was Errol who realized that this chance was the only one for all of them, and asked for his mother and nanny to hold on a little longer. While everyone was in turmoil, the emperor's secretary was delivering the documents. Everyone understood what was about to happen, as the emperor realized what was going on. He couldn't even believe it. He used his power to burn the paper delivered, which surprised Errol a lot. After all, he couldn't even think that the emperor was not aware of everything. The emperor turned to the empress and asked what was wrong, as there was a flaw in his predecessor, and his concubines received almost nothing, but the only thing the empress did was pretend she could not believe it. Then the emperor, with an incredibly serious expression, asked why he did not know that the distribution of the budget was precisely his direct responsibility. The eldest son wanted to speak up for her, so he came forward at that moment to express his own point of view, saying it was a kind of misunderstanding, because the empress certainly would not have done such a thing. However, the emperor became even more upset. He said that there was no difference because she was the leader responsible for the mistakes of her subordinates. It was because of her negligence that his younger brother was left hungry and without clothes. The eldest son looked at Errol with very guilty eyes, which definitely did not please him. Errol did not feel the queen's aura because of the king's charisma. Then, the father asked the eldest son if he wanted to say that his mother had nothing to do with this. He remained silent and lowered his head before the king. The emperor approached the empress and said he was very disappointed with her. Lady Lavanna began to tell the emperor not to blame her because everything was her fault, as she did not deserve such a thing. The emperor could not understand what she was talking about after all. What mistake? Lavanna just looked at him. The emperor tells her that she gave birth to his son. That is enough to be considered a member of the imperial family. Miss Lavanna blushed a little, and the emperor touched her hand and said that she should be proud of herself for being part of the royal family. The two looked deeply at each other, and it was this image that caused a bad reaction from the empress. The emperor returns to talk with the empress and orders her to find the culprits and make them pay. He adds that he will no longer tolerate such mistakes. The empress looked at the ground. Her hands were trembling a lot, but still said she would ensure that this would never happen again. The emperor looked at her one more time and warned her for the last time that she would be punished next time. She continued to apologize, promising to find the culprit and punish them severely, but deep down she just thought it was the fault of these despicable people. The empress approached and said she did not know how it happened, nor even how to justify herself before Levana. Arel understood that she was pretending, and thought that nobody would fall for such a bad act. However, his mother said that Aaliyah did not need to apologize to her. Arel could not understand at all what his mother was doing. She should at least hit the empress, as clearly the empress, who seemed to know everything, was before them. The empress said this would never happen again, but Arel could not see sincerity in her eyes. At least she should appear guilty, and that goes for their eyes too. Arel wonders how many of them are involved in this. At this point, Arel's birthday came to an end, and the hole in the budget was plugged. Not even the empress was involved in it. They quickly found the guilty party, a family of lesser aristocrats, and then, without special procedures, they were simply executed in the palace. The servants discussed the fact that at the end of the investigation, the aristocrats even admitted their guilt, but could not imagine where they would spend such a large sum of money. Everyone was glad that everything was resolved, but only Arel realized that the real culprit, or rather she, had escaped punishment. The case was closed immediately. He thought all this was incredibly unfair, but as soon as he grows up, he will certainly make everyone else pay. While he was still not grown up, his body really wanted to eat, so the only thing he could do was cry. Chaina saw and went to see what it was. Arel was already being fed with a spoon. He was happy with his current life, but still thought he needed to work on his body, as he would still be a baby for a long time. However, after some reflection, he realized that all he had to do was eat and play. After eating, he decided it was time to sleep. Arel woke up with the noise of a carriage arriving at his house. He noticed that several people got out of the carriage. He could see this because he went to the window while his nanny slept. He heard 3 people entering his room. One of them was his mother, and more footsteps of an adult and a child. Arel forgot the nanny, and feared that if she woke up, everyone would see his power. He flew towards the nanny as fast as possible, and as soon as the adults entered the room, they saw Arel pinching the nanny's cheeks. Seeing this scene, Lady Levana screamed at Arel to stop hurting the nanny, because the nanny should be loved and obeyed. At this point, the nanny herself realized that Lady Phanelia had also arrived. China immediately greeted her and apologized as she had not prepared anything. However, Lady Phanelia, who had just arrived at the castle, asked China not to apologize, as she herself had not notified anyone of the visit. Arel remembered she was another concubine. Levana said that if they had been notified of the visit in advance, they would have prepared something for her. But Mrs. Phanelia said she wanted to speak with Levana privately. Levana couldn't understand why she had come to see her after all. She thought the conversation would be serious. But while Levana waited for something serious, Phanelia apologized to her. Levana choked on her tea after hearing the apology, recomposed herself, and asked what Phanelia meant. Phanelia apologized for not behaving properly at the banquet in honor of Prince Ariel's birthday. She seemed truly remorseful. In the past, as the war reached its peak across the continent, her Kenchester family was the one that contributed most to the victory. There was no one in the empire who hadn't heard of her family, but that was a thing of the past now. Due to the fact that recently no strong boys for the war were born into the family, the glory quickly faded. Rumors emerged that they had been financially tight in recent years, so Mrs. Levana asked if she had come because of family problems. Phanelia said they were really in debt. Remember the Empress forcing her to do something, so it was very likely that her family was to blame for the hole in the finances. At that moment, Phanelia took out her money bag and placed it on the table. Levana asked why this was. Phanelia said it wasn't enough to solve the problem, but she wanted to give this to her, and says she really regretted it. She wanted Levana to know that she was not asking for forgiveness. Phanelia asked that Levana direct her hatred only towards her. At that moment, the door of the room opened and, unnoticed from a certain distance, was Phanelia's daughter standing there. Then Mrs. Levana understood that Phanelia just wanted to protect her child from conflict with other members of the imperial family. So, Mrs. Levana said it was okay, that she didn't need all this, because she believed that the person in front of her certainly wasn't guilty of anything. Phanelia asked them not to feel sorry for her, but Mrs. Levana said she didn't. Levana said directly that at that moment they didn't need to antagonize each other. She understands everything, and bears no grudge against her family. She extended the money bag back and said it was a proof of intimacy between them. Levana asked Phanelia to think of it as a gift. After all, she understands exactly why they had problems in their palaces. She is not sure, but it is very likely that it was because Levana was a servant of the Empress. Arl was shocked to hear this information. Now it was clear to him why his mother was so poorly seen. He began to roll around the room thinking that his mother had a very difficult life, and the nanny didn't even understand what she had to do to calm Arl. At that moment, Chena asked if he was okay. Arl noticed that she was worried, so he made a happy face and knew what to do to not upset her. The nanny realized that the young prince is just in a volatile mood, so the nanny left to do some exercise with Princess Kenia. Noticing that everyone was busy with something else, Arl decided to use his energy once more to listen to the conversation between his mother and Fenilia. The conversation was already about what Levana had said, that she couldn't hide from the oppression of the Empress. But Levana had Arl, and that was why she had decided that, as long as Arl did not grow up, she would protect him and would no longer allow the Empress to harm her family. At this moment, she was more serious than ever. She offered to be friends with Mrs. Fenilia. Fenilia realized that they were elevating to something more than a conspiracy, a union of the powers of the concubines. Fenilia thought that, even if someone suddenly finds themselves cornered, at least there will be a helping hand. That is what this union is for. Errol was confused because he couldn't even imagine that his mother knew about everything. She even knew about the conflict between the Empress and the concubines. However, what will she do next? Errol thought he should prepare for all this in advance. As he was thinking about it, the same girl approached him. He couldn't understand where she had come from. He thought she wouldn't be able to enter the cradle, but all she did was climb into his bed and start pinching his cheeks. She really liked that. Errol thought he was not a toy for her to be pinching, so Errol was hoping someone would save him. Chena came running first and thought our Arel was really cute. Arel realized that all was lost, and the nanny kept saying that the princess could come to visit Arel more often. The princess, of course, said yes, she would love to visit him. Arel could not find help anywhere. And time passed, and now Arel was 30 months old. Soon it will be his 3rd birthday. Life seemed incredibly fleeting to him. In principle, he was angry for not being able to speak correctly as always. After all, even if they think so, he still has to live to adulthood to learn finally. He remembered his 45th life, where he managed to seduce a girl in less than 10 minutes. A man has to be eloquent in speech. But at that exact moment, the princess entered his room. She ran to meet him, but Errol decided to hide. However, even if he tried, the princess quickly found him. He was upset and depressed, but the princess just wanted to play hide and seek with him. Errol wanted to refuse, but the princess had already fled, dragging him. She ran to a bigger place. They went out, and he understood that after the visit from that same Lady Fenilia, the princess had been coming to him often. Errol thinks she might be coming over because of what the nanny said, but even so, he saw nothing wrong with it, as it was the only way Levana and Fenilia could form a strong friendship. All the time, Kania said that Arl is very lucky to have a good sister. Kania says even though Arl is still small, she will play and take care of him, but when he grows up, he will have to take care of her. She asked for a promise that he would come as soon as possible. Errol agreed and thanked her, but he couldn't understand why she was so obsessed with him. But as soon as he thought about it, Kanya confessed that she simply adores him, because compared to Leonil or even Meryl, it's much more fun to play with Errol, because he is the best option. Kanaya smiled and said they got along well. Errol laughed embarrassedly, as he thought that once he grew up, she would regret those words. The princess already picked him up in her arms and said it was playtime. She would even carry him to the spot. However, the girl didn't understand that Errol was about to suffocate. Errol asked for help. One of the maids of Kania's entourage told the princess that the prince could get hurt when carried like that. This made her ask Princess Kania to hand over Errol, because even the princess should not carry heavy things. She was still a child. But Errol thanked fate because he was saved. Princess Kania was not happy. She shouted that she wanted to play. The maid said she could draw or play some instrument. She said she was tired of all that. It was simply boring. The maid asked what she would like to do. Princess Kania looked around and picked up a stick, saying she wanted to learn to wield a sword because she had seen her brother Kyle doing it. Errol, noticing that she was practicing with a piece of stick, realized that the center of gravity was not displaced, and her body balance was good. Even considering the fact she was holding the most common type of wood in her hands, she had potential. Errol himself loved fencing very much. He even missed that sensation. The princess wanted to learn fencing to be strong and defeat knights. However, the maid said she could not learn. This really upset her. She asked why, since her brothers Kyle and Leonil were allowed. Then why not her? But the maid just said that Princess Kania should not dirty her hands and asked her not to argue with her, as it was custom. She said that above all, Princess Kania should be elegant and feminine, but the maid realized that her sword was missing. She noticed that her sword was already in Princess Kania's hands. The maid ran up to her, talking for her to give it back. But Princess Kania continued to run, saying that she would learn fencing and that's that. The maid ran after her, telling her to train with the sword sheath at least, since she wanted it so much. Errol stayed there, content. Apparently he was liking his little sister Kania more and more. Errol had already turned 5 years old when he was already learning to ride a horse, and with all his might, he was still riding a toy horse. After all, he was still a child. Chaina asked if Errol didn't want to ride a real horse, but the only response from the prince was that he only wanted to ride his because it was not dangerous at all. Chaina said that all boys should be interested in horses or swords, and it was time to do so. Chaina was very worried about Errol. She wanted him to become strong, but Errol smiled and told her to put those thoughts away, because the prince on a white horse was a relic of the past. The nanny regretted seeing Errol like this, but there was nothing she could do. Errol thought and realized that of all the lives he lived, his extreme talent would only bring misfortune. He had achieved perfection in fencing and had to constantly face others who dared to challenge him. When he excelled in magic, he had to confront those who tried to destroy him. With all this skill he accumulated, he always found himself in front of conflicts. Errol had some problems in the palace, but what he was doing now was important. Chaina wished that Errol would work well, that he would work productively. Well, as soon as the door closed and Errol was out of sight, he immediately lay down on the bed because only losers should work, not him. Errol was constantly crying, constantly seeking pity while trying to calm himself down. Then we realized that the only thing Errol didn't want to do was simply to study. Chaina said that Errol was already 5 years old, the right age to learn about the world around him from all angles. However, Errol told Chaina that he didn't care about the outside world. He didn't want to know anything about it, as he didn't need to. Chaina sighed and said that Errol speaks as if he had lived several lives. This surprised Errol, as he could not have been found out that way. Errol said it was not like that, and immediately lay down on the arm of the chair. Errol thought he had worked hard enough. He was tired of it all, as he was fed up with learning repeatedly. But his nanny took him to the library and told him that, according to imperial law, 5 years is the age when one should begin to learn. Then she brought him some books. Errol looked at all those books and could not understand why there were so many of them. He wondered if he really had to read all of them. As soon as Errol took the books in his hands, he started to spin them. That was the only thing he liked to do with them, but Chaina tells Errol he needed to read, not spin them. Errol, picking up the books, began to build houses with them. Chaina said he had the opportunity many want and still cannot have, and he is still able to start learning. She said he needs to respect the books and stop spoiling them. Chaina told Errol to sit up straight, but the only thing Errol was thinking about was how to get out of his room. He figured out exactly how to do this. It was the skill he learned in his new life. He lay on the floor and began to cry because he didn't want to learn. However, as soon as his mother entered the room, the concert he had organized ended. He ended up having to sit down and start reading. Errol knew he should have started learning now, but ironically, the more he tried, the more he put the people around him in danger. The more talented a son of a concubine and the emperor he was, the sooner they would want to get rid of him. Although this may seem unfair to many, but destiny had already decided everything for everyone. So, Errol just thought he simply had no other choice but to take everything into his own hands, and thought that for the sake of everyone, he should live idly by. He began to drool. Then the nanny asked him not to get distracted, and he was trying, not just for himself, but for his mother. Errol asked, trying to make it clear, if he could learn after all because he thought he was lazy, but Chaina just said that if he continued to be lazy like this, he would upset his mother, which is exactly what he didn't want in his new life. So he realized that he would have to study hard. He would study everything except fencing, or he would definitely get stabbed in the ribs, and he also didn't want to learn magic. Errol was wondering what he would be when he grew up if he didn't do anything like that. However, despite all his hopes, a week later, it was said by his nanny that he came to teach magic to Errol. Errol screamed because he didn't want to be a wizard. Errol thinks that a wizard will definitely be able to sense his mana, which currently is at the level of the strongest magic existing. Errol wanted to hide his abilities in some way at least. However, the nanny didn't let him do anything. She already took him by the hand and said not to be afraid because everything will pass quickly and without pain. As soon as Errol entered the room, he immediately saw the teacher with an incredibly surprised expression. Our hero could see the mana all over the body of the mage standing in front of him, but he wonders what he looks like in the eyes of the mage. At the same moment, the teacher approached and started to touch our hero. The nanny said that our hero was special, but the teacher didn't think so. A bit strange maybe. However, the teacher does not feel the mana in our hero at all. The nanny said that this was impossible. The mage said he used his mana to read the prince's veins, but couldn't find a single drop of mana. Our hero laughed, saying it was useless, because on the way there he carefully restricted the circulation of his mana and then concentrated it at one point and released all the energy. Seeing the reaction of the mage, he immediately stopped and felt relief. He simply can't see the mana, if it's not there. However, all this had its disadvantages. The master said that, as our hero has no propensity to be a wizard, the professor can detect small amounts of mana even in commoners, but it is our hero who does not have any. Our hero is not sure if he's doing the right thing, because he ended up just disappointing his mother. He thought it was necessary since everyone should think he is a weak and incapable baby. He tried to apologize to his mother in his mind for being such an incompetent son. They also had a fencing teacher in the house, his new mentor, who said that if our hero trained hard, he would become as strong as him. His name was Lanfil Tagarin. Our hero understood him to be a young knight of about 25 years, no more than that. He is weak, very weak, said the protagonist. He saw the tenacity of a true warrior, for in his 100 years of life, he had been in an incredible number of battles. His body was hardened in battles with the most terrible creatures that the knight could not even dream of. So, the one standing before our hero doesn't come close to the real talent of the protagonist. At the same time, our hero asked Lanfil to start the training. He wanted him to teach him, but at that moment thought that he was not even his equal. His teacher told our hero to trust him, that if he worked hard, he would definitely become incredibly strong. The protagonist asked to start with the basics, as he didn't want to do something difficult. But our hero remembered that his friend, Princess Kania, uses a weight device to increase her physical abilities. But Lanfil said that for their family, this is normal. So, what was our hero supposed to do? Lanfil started with the basics, saying that the fundamental things for fencing are flexibility and balance. He prepared something simple and also asked not to worry. He put our hero on a stump and told him to stand, but our hero started to show that it was incredibly difficult and that he thought he was going to fall. He said the height was not great, so even if he fell, he wouldn't get hurt. With that, our hero failed at balance. At the same time, they began to practice flexibility. This also did not work for our hero, and only then did the knight decide that they should try wielding the sword, training accuracy, where again our hero showed a very poor result. Then, he asked his mentor if he was really so untalented, but the knight said not to worry, as this was just the first training. Only through practice would they be able to improve. But at this point, while our hero was talking with his mentor, he realized that he was being followed. He realized that the more mediocre his results were, the quicker they would spread, since as we know, rumors spread very quickly. So in a moment, everyone was saying that our hero had no more ability than a piece of ice, and that was what everyone was talking about. A man who was probably watching our hero said that our hero's body was so weak that he could barely stand up, even stating that he had no talent for fencing. The Empress was pleased to hear this, but only our hero understood that the rumors might calm his guard. At the same time, while our hero was eating his food, he asked when his teacher would arrive, but the nanny replied that it would not be long. He realized that now everyone was saying he was a useless prince, since almost all teachers refused to teach him. However, he found a hero who decided to come, a man named Gamal Pernea, and today he became our hero's new teacher. He will teach him foreign languages. Our hero looked at him and noticed only despair on his face. He was probably forced. At the same time, many books were thrown on the table for our hero, and he said that it was just the basics of grammar in one day. He said this was the normal pace of study, because they were already planning to move on to a new topic tomorrow. Our hero did not understand what was wrong with him, so he decided to pretend and try his best. He did not understand why the teacher kept pressing him, even though he did not ask for an opinion. Would the teacher simply ignore him in all classes? Even though our hero was incredibly small, it was in languages that he was skilled. He had learned many languages in all his past lives, so his language skills could be considered great from the start. He decided to find a dictionary, a grammar book, and more foreign literature. There was much to see in the world, and all languages were built on a similar principle, so it was only a matter of time until the teaching was completed. Throughout the night, our hero spent reading books. In the morning, our hero was asked how he even claimed to have learned all the material, but he said it was all true. The teacher was shocked, but our hero understood that, compared to the languages of neighboring countries, his native imperial language was still somewhat difficult. The teacher asked him to read his book, which he was about to open for him. The young prince kept thinking that, no matter what a child could do, reading even a simple book before 12 years old was difficult. At the same moment, the young one began to read, surprising the teacher because if a student succeeds, the teacher's reputation also increases. He had chosen what could be a genius of a higher order. At this point, the whole country was shocked, as the prince could not only not use magic, he did not know how to use it, he did not possess it at all. So how could a fool like the young prince learn languages in just 2 days? At the same moment, everyone thought our hero was just a genius. And the source of the rumor was the fact that the teacher, slightly drunk, began to talk about what he had seen at first sight. Finally, the rumors reached the emperor, who realized that if the sword or magic were not the prince's skills, it would not be easy to deal with his thing unsuitable for him. He even thought he was truly a genius. The lady spoke of her regret for her and her son having saddened him. She noticed that her son had changed a lot. Was she educating him correctly? The emperor noticed the excitement on the face of his concubine and approached her. He asked if she was really worried about him, as the emperor thought our hero was growing up to be an incredible boy. And here our hero saw the full picture. He said he would still show the wonders of the world, but it's better to show them in doses to keep interest in his person, and while he is still a boy, he can relax and reap his benefits. For now he is cosplaying as a genius. A few days later he was allocated to the court. Surely it was the emperor who decided that he should be protected, as our hero did not know how to fight. He loved having such a thoughtful emperor father, but at the same time was distracted by a very loud sound. It was the nanny who brought something very heavy. Our hero wondered what it was about. Then, at the same moment, his mother told him they were gifts from the emperor himself. He was surprised that his father had given him a present, but when he opened it, he noticed they were just jewels. All these would be precious gifts from the emperor himself, but our hero was only interested in one pendant, as it seemed to help concentrate and activate mental abilities. However, it's likely that this thing would only boil his brain and leave him very tired. All the nannies were enchanted with our hero as they read him incredibly well. Our hero understood that most likely they saw the object just as a pendant, while he saw something inside the stone. He had no use for it, although he even thought of giving everything to his little sister, as she had been training very hard lately to be a real orangutan. In the end, our hero turned to his mother and asked if he could give that thing to his little sister. And the lady did not mind, because if he gave away one thing, they would not lose anything. He was asked about what he liked about Princess Kania in the first place, so he could think of nothing better to say than that she was very strong. It was a happy day for all the inhabitants of the castle, as it was the day when the emperor generously gifted the prince. Our hero sat at the table, his nanny serving him desserts, sweets from the best chefs, but our hero tasted everything and realized that all the desserts lacked sugar. The nanny asked if she should call the chef or not. After a small silence, our hero said to call the alchemist. The nanny was shocked by this statement, but our hero was just thinking about getting some Coca-Cola or chocolate. Therefore, he needed the alchemist to recreate that flavor. So the nanny asked why he needed an alchemist. At this point, he realized that even if he tried to explain, she would not be able to understand anything, because it would be strange for a 5-year-old boy to demand an alchemist to recreate the flavors that he had had in his past life, the flavors that he liked. Without the alchemist's help, it was simply unrealistic and impossible. He had no idea how to process products to achieve the same flavor as Coca-Cola, because such technology doesn't exist in this world anyway. And our hero is so eager to drink a chilled, sweet, fizzy drink. However, as he is a genius, he will think of something. He immediately went out the door saying he was going to study. The nanny even thought she had misheard, as she certainly did not expect to hear that from our hero. He understood that Coke is a set of chemical reactions, and he definitely needs an alchemist to attempt this. 3 years later, when our hero was 8 years old, he was sitting in a meeting about how everyone was planning to build new bridges in the areas where traders were moving to. Our hero was asked what he thought about this. He thought it was simply great, and also asked who had designed that bridge in the first place. At one point, the man said it was he who had built it. He was pleased, thinking that our hero was praising him. But despite the joy on our hero's face, which was replaced by despair, he said that if he brought a mistake like that again, he would fire him. He said everything looked good, but still, in winter the snow would accumulate, and everything would immediately collapse. He said the construction was unreliable, because if it were overloaded in one place, it would be very unsafe for the citizens who would use the bridge. He said that despite the master having invested in decorations and beauty, he had not thought about safety, as well as the bridge's most important function. The young man asked him to redo the bridge. At this point, it was clear to us that because of his vast knowledge, our hero had a lot of work to do. After all, he was just advising ministers using knowledge from his other lives. Everything looked great after all, 8 years advising the very officials. But where would our hero go after all? Now was the time to showcase his skills. So, he immediately started on the next problem. At that moment, as our hero was leaving, he was noticed by a new maid. She called our hero the silver-haired sage. This nickname was very shocking for our hero, as he did not expect to be called that at all. He asked where that nickname came from, then asked her not to call him that from now on. The maid wanted to call him that one more time, but then thought better of it. It left him a bit embarrassed, but people still made up a stupid nickname for him, which turned out to be incredibly boring. Our hero's mother could not understand where he had gone, but the nanny replied that he had requested an audience with the emperor himself. He said he wanted to study alchemy. While our hero was sitting in the carriage, he realized that since the emperor responded so quickly, it meant that he had gained special favor. After all, he really works hard for the good of the empire. So even if he confessed, he would be right, for even with so many lives on his resume, he was nervous during the conversation with his father, of course, because he needed to be as eloquent as possible, ensuring everything he wanted sounded discreet. At this moment, he was already in his father's office. He was discussing how he could strengthen the empire, using all his strengths. He even had the opportunity to do so in the field of alchemy, since he is not skilled in fencing or in magical arts. All that remains for him is science. The emperor observed and understood that our hero, though not an expert, had a very sensible head on his shoulders. He said he would arrange alchemy teachers for his son, but only if this was really what he wanted. However, our hero had already requested everything he had only dreamed of. In fact, after the announcement that Prince Arel needed an alchemy teacher, candidates came forward. It was an opportunity to leave a mark in history. Then a test task was assigned to create a mirror that could reflect sunlight up to the horizon. Soon, the man who handled the task perfectly, a true connoisseur of alchemy, appeared. The name of this lucky man was Darman Langer. Our hero was also happy and thought he would have an older teacher. However, they sent such a young teacher who had a strange hair color. Our hero asked if it was a natural color, but Darman said that due to many experiments with chemical elements, he inhaled all sorts of things, and that's why they turned white. Our hero wondered how he survived if he was sniffing these elements all the time. He was sure that outwardly he appeared calm, but it was just a mask because alchemy is relentless. If he got hurt or died during research, there would be no one to blame. His teacher also told him that studying alchemy is actually a quite dangerous occupation, being a type of science whose study could come at a very high price. Our hero said he had already considered all the risks, and that alchemy is not the science of magic. He doesn't expect to be taught how to turn lead into gold, as he just wants to explore things like metal alloys, how to find the strongest ones, or create a material that would make building houses easier. At this moment the master was moved, as this meant that the rumors were not lying. The prince indeed was different from all the others. He was actually the genius who would one day lead the empire. Darman kneeled before him, saying directly into his eyes that he would teach him everything he knew. After several days studying alchemy, Darman asked if our hero had really studied alchemy before. The hero couldn't hide that he knew quite a bit, as it was so obvious. Then, he told his teacher that he had just read a few books. The teacher was happy, realizing that the rumors were not lying, and our hero was glad he had not suspected anything until now. At this point, he didn't continue his experiments until night, while Darman helped him all the time to make the right decisions. Thus, our hero now knew how to extract lead and other chemicals, except for metals or medicines. Everything was identical to what he already knew, and there wasn't much difference when experimenting. Everything went according to plan, but at a certain point, a petition reached the emperor from his son. His son decided to expand the cadre to 4 alchemists. The emperor immediately ordered that the best alchemists of the empire be assembled. His servant was worried about what the little prince was going to do with these alchemists, as they were spending the empire's budget on their research. People might start resenting them, but the emperor remembered his son's words, remembered how right he was about this. He understood that his son was working for the good of the empire. A while later, our hero told his hires that he wanted to invent a drink through alchemy. This invention nobody could understand, as our hero, with such an incredible brain and knowledge, spent his intense creation on a drink. Many people were upset because they left their previous jobs for this, but our hero asked them not to worry, as he would pay them all more than enough, regardless of success or failure in this business. Thus, at that exact moment, everyone started saying they would help. Many had heard that such development already existed, however. The prince really wanted something of his own. Our hero understood that it was an incredible motivation. Money and fame, these were the two things that would work for him. So they would have to hurry up and create an amazing soft drink. A few days later, a man with a cart was arriving at the palace, transporting barrels that had come from all over. Errol was pleased with this, as the sparkling water had finally arrived. Damon opens one of the barrels, asking if they were going to drink that, but as soon as he looks inside, he sees dark water and a bad smell. Ariel approaches, saying they would not drink that yet, as it was just a raw material for the drink. But as soon as Errol looks inside the barrel, he also feels the same bad smell as the man. Errol says this is not working and there is no chance they could drink that. Errol starts checking all the barrels and realizes that all the water that had arrived was bad for consumption. Then, he turns to everyone and says there is no other way, they would have to make artificial sparkling water, which surprises everyone. The confused alchemists start reading the papers Ariel had given them, but Ariel starts smiling and says it would not be easy to find some clues, based only on the basic theories he had given them, which makes the alchemists a bit more apprehensive. Ariel emphasizes that he trusts everyone there, as they were the best alchemists they had. So, they could do it. Errol goes up to Damon and asks what he thinks. Damon smiles, a little worried, but agrees, saying they are the best alchemists in the kingdom of Ernesia, so they could do it. Errol walks away humming and says the pleasure of alchemists is to test theories and put them into practice. So, he would not interfere anymore, taking their time. As he leaves, Errol wonders if they could really do this in a week. Even so, Errol points out that he has already intrigued them, so they would probably do their best to do it as quickly as possible. A few days later, in a room of the kingdom, some shouts are heard, telling all the alchemists that he promised this would bring vitality to the kingdom of Ernesia. It was Arl, who was in a room with his alchemists around. Arl complimented his words, saying that this sparkling water they were producing would bring great fortunes to the kingdom. The alchemists were not so confident about it, but Errol appeared to be extremely satisfied with it. Errol takes a bottle in his hand and thinks he did not imagine they would make the sparkling water so quickly. He starts to say that with this, they have completed the first part. Now they can start testing the water. Damon points to the water and asks Errol if this sparkling water would really become so popular. One of the alchemists says the water really can give a small jolt to the person who drinks it, but the taste is extremely strange. Errol claps for everyone to pay attention and starts explaining that they would not drink it the way it was. Before consumption, they would mix it with fruit juice or alcohol. Chenna enters the room with a tray with some glasses. Errol thinks his original idea was to recreate Coca-Cola, but unfortunately, he cannot obtain coca leaves. Note: in the year of 1903, the then owner of Coca-Cola, Asa Candler, sought the German chemist Louis Schaefer so that he could produce a compound of coca without cocaine. In the same year, Coca-Cola removed cocaine from its drink and replaced it with caffeine and coca leaves just as flavorings. RL solved this problem using carbonated juices, as this was not a bad alternative. RL takes one of the glasses and says he would start the test with lemon juice. Then, he begins to pour the lemon juice into the bottle containing sparkling water. After finishing mixing, he tastes it and simply realizes that the taste is wonderful and thinks he has finally hit the exact point. It is perfect. Errol distributed some to everyone present and asked everyone to try. There would be no problem, as it was just a normal drink. All the alchemists were impressed with the taste and how refreshing it was. Quickly they created a package for commerce and named it Prince Errol's Sparkling Juice, and surprisingly the drink became very popular beyond the kingdom of Ernesia, becoming a luxury item among the nobles, surprising everyone who tried it. This man, surprised by the taste, is the Lord of the Northern Territory, Count de Mont. He asks his butler if it was really Prince Errol who had made this drink. The butler says yes, the drink had been made under the supervision of Prince Errol. The drink became popular as an expensive luxury item, and also contributed a lot to the economy of the kingdom of Ernesia. The butler says he heard rumors that a carriage full of gold arrives at the concubine's palace every day. Dement says it was all his fault, as at the time when Aurel was just a baby, he judged Aurel, saying he would not amount to much in the future. Dement cries and hits the table, saying that if he had imagined Aurel would be so promising at that time, he would have intervened. Then he shouts that, from today onwards, he would need to pay more attention to Aurel's next steps. Meanwhile, elsewhere a sword training session was happening. Kanya was fighting and had learned very well. Kanya, now 16 years old, turns and asks Aurel how she was doing. Aurel claps and says she is doing very well. Aurel, now 10 years old, and Kanya's guard come up and congratulate her, saying she is doing great. Aurel smiles and says, "This was wonderful." The guard says Kanya's fencing was impeccable. Aurel looks and thinks he agrees with that, but he thinks better and finds that Kanya is not perfect yet. However, she really had made significant progress. She probably would beat all the boys her age. Kanya starts jumping for joy, thanking both of them. Aurel thinks that as much as she was a bit scary when she was younger, deep down she is really a sweet girl. The guard says that for now it was enough, so they should take a short break. They go to a table and sit down. Kanya says she has heard a lot about Aurel these last few days. She says she heard that the development of sparkling drinks not only contributed to the situation of the royal palace, but also to the finances of the entire kingdom of Ernesia. Aurel opens his arms and smiles, saying he did no more than his duty as a prince. Kanya smiles and looks at Aurel, saying that, besides all this, everyone was commenting on how he is a perfect son. Everyone envied Miss Levana. As soon as Aurel hears this, he stops responding and starts thinking that this was not just a simple story about his drink production, because his mother, Levana Ainrest, is from a noble family that had gone bankrupt. And, at that time, the only thing left to them was a small territory that they managed, and thus they survived as commoners. As soon as Aurel learned the complete story of his mother's family, he entrusted the distribution of drinks to the Ainrest family, and the results were wonderful. The stores were filled with people, making huge lines to be able to buy. Not to mention that the demand for yogurt and MSG also exploded. And thanks to this, the finances of the Ainrest family became so wealthy that no other merchant in this kingdom could match them. Kanya cries and asks Aurel to go a bit slower, as the two were almost the same age. So many people compared the two. Aurel smiles and thinks that it was about this. Aurel gets up and invites Kanya to eat and drink, as now he was very wealthy. But Kanya puts the wooden sword on Aurel's neck, saying that it was of no use if he could not exercise or defend himself. Kanya says there would be no problem, as she would teach him to fight from today onwards, and hands a sword to Aurel, who thinks she remains annoying. He thanks her for her kindness, but says he does not need it, as he was fine. Aurel remembers that, in his other life, he was the best swordsman in the world and the best mage in the world. So, in this world, he did not want to attract so much attention, but as always, in the end, it did not matter. Kanya charges at Aurel, who was forced to start fighting. Kanya was trying to teach him, explaining how he should do it, so Aurel just accepted and began to do it, as it would be faster to finish this way. Aurel realized he couldn't quite feel Kanya's movements, because Kanya's dream and goal, the desire to create a family and be a fencing master on her own, this kind of dream must have filled such a fragile girl with so much energy. Aurel thinks he could help Kanya while they were fighting. He would secretly give some of his energy to her so she would become stronger and stronger. Then they continue training for a while under the supervision of Kanya's guard. The next day, inside a carriage, Aurel was passing through the city and everyone around was happy to see him. Aurel looks out the window and thinks that maybe he is attracting so much attention because this carriage there is like a Ferrari. As he looked out the window, he sees one of his knights passing by and thinks that it's as if he had become an idol. Aurel sits back and thinks that everything is going well, but what would his father talk to him about now? Aurel thinks for a bit and suspects it might be about a new allowance due to the achievements he's been having. Then finally, Aurel arrives and sits down at the table with the king, who is his father. He thinks that in the past, he was a bit embarrassed by this silence at the start of dinner, but now he had become accustomed to it. Aurel thinks that since he was there, he would enjoy this wonderful food, as he had gotten used to it. Lately, he had been going there several times due to various reports. But as soon as he starts to eat, his father asks if he thinks about taking up an official position in the government. This makes Aurel choke on his food, as he was not expecting this. Finally, this moment had come. Theorel points out that it is a bit early for that, but in light of Arel's many achievements, nobody would oppose if he accepts. Theorel asks what Errol thinks about this and if he had any job in mind, but Errol, slightly embarrassed, smiles and says he hadn't thought about that subject, as his real reason in this life was to have fun and eat. Then he picks up a cup of tea and thinks he should calm down after drinking a little. Arel responds to his father that he does not know where his father got that idea, but at the moment he still liked to learn science and alchemy, as there was still much to learn. The two stare at each other for a while. Arel begins to think that the first prince is not in the government, but wants Arel to go. This is a bit strange, not to mention that there has been no move from the queen and the first prince's side so far. This is because Arel has not yet crossed the line, always kept in his place, not causing problems to anyone. The last time, the ball was called off because of that prank from the weird prince, and that was a stroke of luck. Arel thinks that there is a big difference between being loved by your father, the king, and being trusted with an important governmental position. Arel notices that lately he has been getting into gossips and fighting with his brothers often. So, he thinks about the possibility of his father trying to separate them on purpose. Could that really be his father's goal? Nature is not the only place with the laws of the jungle. Being on the throne means being strong as an eagle. If weak, clearly will not survive, even with hundreds of past lives. Could this really be what Theorel wants for Arel? Then, Arel starts to smile and remembers all his strength, and thinks that all this does not matter, as he would not be easily defeated by anyone in this world. After dinner, Arel is riding a horse alone, thinking that this is the first time he goes this far from the palace. He continues riding, happy as can be, thinking that he is finally starting to feel the freedom. Arel remembers all the work he had in the last years. He thinks he never imagined he would be the type of person who works from home. He remembers one of his lives where he traveled all over the world and then all over the universe, looking for someone stronger than him, but he didn't find anyone, and this made him quite dejected. But finally, he was feeling alive again, running with his horse without worries. But suddenly Kanya appears by his side, telling him to go a bit slower. Kanya said she didn't know that Errol could ride a horse so well. Errol was very happy and grateful to Kanya, as this whole trip was thanks to her. Errol says he can ride well because the horse is very smart, but as soon as he looks back, he notices that there are several escort knights following them. He asks Kanya if all this is really necessary for a short trip. Arel feels the energy of the knights and realizes that only the strongest were chosen to accompany them. Kanya says that the strongest are there. Arel smiles and says, "They don't need all this, but it's okay." This is normal since Kanya is a princess. Suddenly Arel feels something and asks Kanya to wait a moment. Looking towards the forest, he senses magical energy. Kanya asks what's happening and why they are stopping there. Arel says they need to go back now because there are monsters in the forest, but Kanya doesn't understand anything since there was no noise or anything like that. How did Arel know this without even seeing anything? Arel tries to brush it off, saying he just has a good sixth sense and believes there are traps around. Kanya is a bit taken aback. Then, the knights continue to enter the forest without any fear. Arel yells at them, saying they should prioritize the safety of the princes and ensure their safe passage. One of the knights turns around and says this is indeed the right way. Besides, it is also Princess Kanya's training ground. This leaves Arel very surprised, as he really felt a very strange energy there. The princess takes the lead, raises her sword, and enters the forest excitedly. Arel is left stunned by this, thinking he could not have been wrong. He had really felt something there. He starts to remember the beginning of the journey. Arel and Kanya were sitting at a table to eat. Kanya mentions she is going to make a short trip and invites Arel to join her. Arel thinks about this, but Kanya emphasizes that he must be bored from spending all his time working there. Kanya says she has always liked to hunt and experience new adventures, so he agrees to join her. As soon as they depart, she asks him if this isn't much more fun. Arel looks at her and thinks this is real torture because they were full of guards and traveling extremely slowly. Kanya says, traveling is practicing and practicing is traveling. She looks at him with a happy face and says she knew he would come, even if it was just for training, because she knew he trusted her completely. Kanya emphasizes that he doesn't need to worry, as she would protect him from anything. Errol looks and feels a bit happier. He thinks there is something very special about Princess Kanya. Returning to the present, they finally arrived in the middle of the forest. They set up a small camp, and Errol takes the lead and starts explaining the fight strategy. He takes a branch and a map and starts saying that the operation is right there. Then, some troops would have to lure the monsters to one side, while Princess Kanya enters as the troops deal with the monsters that were lured. Using time and energy correctly, they would be able to maximize Princess Kanya's abilities. Then, finally, the plan is put into action, and the troops encounter the monsters and alert the princess that there are 20 orcs. Kanya firmly grips her sword and goes into combat without fear, quickly attacking the orcs. Arl just watches this and thinks it was impossible for Kanya to fight an orc in her first real training, but she is showing she is truly strong. She uses her skills perfectly, and her composure is great. The courage and spirit radiating from her entire body was enough to overwhelm everyone. The knights celebrate the excellent fight of the princess. This training continued for a few days. During the night at the camp, Kanya and Arel were sitting near the bonfire. Arel asks if she's okay and not tired, but she quickly responds that she is very well and wanted to fight more. However, Arel warns Kanya and says it's not good to overdo it, as the chances of making a mistake when tired or distracted are much higher. Errol remembers that he was exactly like her in the past, craving fight after fight non-stop, and because of that mistake, he ended up losing his life. Kanya eats and says it's very good. Arel watches happily and thinks that now Kanya is smiling like a true 16-year-old. Arel looks at her and asks why she wants to be strong. Kanya looks a bit sad and says that she is a princess, and sometimes that is very painful because no matter how much she trains, no one is happy with her. They think it's all just a phase, and that soon she would give up all this and do what she should do. Marry someone she doesn't know, for the good of the kingdom. Kanya lowers her head, clearly unhappy with this. Arel just looks at her and thinks that, unfortunately, political marriages are a normal thing in aristocratic society. As the two look at each other, Arel thinks that this age Kanya is at is usually when all this starts and they end up engaged to someone for political reasons. Kanya lifts her head and says she hates that kind of life. So, she chose to live like Prince Arel. This leaves Arel shocked and confused. Kanya continues speaking and explains that he made a lot of money for the kingdom by doing what he knows and likes. Besides, he was recognized for all this. Kanya emphasizes that this is exactly what she wants, to be recognized for what she did and what she's really good at. She wants to contribute to the Kinchester family with her skills and not by marrying someone. She smiles and says she will decide her own destiny. Arel smiles and looks up, saying that if that's what she wants, then she really will be able to choose her own destiny. She smiles and says she would do it just like him. Arel says they would return tomorrow and, as Kanya said, it really was a great trip. He was really happy to have been part of it. But as he was saying this, something with huge wings passes in the sky behind them. The next day, still in the forest, an orc clings to a tree and screams, tearing the tree out to fight against Kanya, who was going all out with everything she had. The knights are frightened, for even on the way back, Kanya did not stop hunting the orcs. They are beginning to think that no one would be able to stop her. Not even the hidden orcs escaped from her. But Errol tells her to stop for now, as they had to hurry to get back on time. She complains but listens to him. Errol says that there were no more orcs nearby for her to fight, so there was nothing more to do. So, she decides to listen and agrees to continue the journey. As Kanya approaches her horse, she notices that it is a bit strange. Arel says it is not injured, but it seems very tired, so it would be a bit difficult to use it for riding at the moment. He invites Kanya to ride on his horse, so they can proceed together. A knightess comes closer and says she would take care of the horse back there with the mages. She asks them to take good care of it. She gets on Errol's horse but asks to be in control. Errol smiles and says no problem. After all, she was better than him at these things. They start to head back. Kanya leads the troop of knights, quickly moving ahead of them. But as they continued on their journey, Errol feels something strange. Kanya notices and asks what is happening to him. Errol looks up and thinks there is something there. He couldn't see, but he felt it perfectly. He was sure that there was something behind the cloud. The cloud begins to dissipate, and a wyvern emerges from behind the cloud. Arel takes the reins from Kania's hand and asks her to hold on tight to him. Arel yells to the other knights that a wyvern was coming. They should run back into the forest. The knights don't believe it, as they haven't seen anything. One starts to say there was no wyvern there. Another tries to calm Arel, saying there was a reason they chose that place as a training location. He says the Lord there often hunts the wyverns from there and had confirmed that there were none in that area. But, as he finishes speaking, the wyvern grabs him, pulling him off the horse and taking him into the sky, leaving all the other knights frightened by this. Suddenly, several wyverns started to appear all at once, causing everyone to panic. Arel begins to run with his horse while Kania holds on and says there were several of them. What should they do now? Arel looks apprehensively and thinks that this is not normal, as wyverns live alone, but this time they appeared in a group. The wyverns were attacking and destroying the knights, who had no chance of fighting against such a number of wyverns. They tried to run but were slaughtered one after the other. Arel realizes that they were not just hunting prey, but killing. This was not just an attack to eat, but a massacre. One of the wyverns begins to release its acid breath. Arel continues to run, trying to keep Princess Kania safe. Meanwhile, he thinks that the power of a wyvern was already overwhelming. Why were they using strong poison? Kania, seeing this, screams as she watches her guards die without any chance of fighting. After all the guards were killed, the wyverns begin to chase Arel and Kania. Arel asks her not to look back anymore and to hold on very tight. One of the wyverns attacks, using acid breath, but suddenly the mages appear and begin to try to protect Kania and Arel. The wyverns were beginning to surround everyone there. Arel, seeing this, thinks they couldn't keep running like this. Arel thinks that the wyverns are resistant to magic below the 4th class. Throughout the fight, the mages inevitably became disadvantaged. One of the wyverns is approaching the two quickly. Arel sees there is no more to do, then thinks what he can do. Then with just one finger, he transforms his mana energy into a ball, this is called Danji Gong, and hits one of the wyverns, knocking it down quickly. Arel thinks one is down. Quickly, he does the same with all the others, defeating them quickly. Arel tries to disguise his strength and says the mage had done a good job. However, right in front of them, another wyvern appears out of nowhere, leaving both him and the princess frightened. The princess screams for help and calls for her mother. However, the wyvern is quickly cut in half by Kania's personal guard, who yells for them to run from there as fast as possible, telling them to run to the forest. Arel, seeing this, thinks he already imagined that Kania's personal guard had extraordinary abilities. Arel thinks that, with her there, they would probably have a good time. So, he starts to run again with the princess. Unexpectedly, someone with a cold voice says that he really held up very well. Arel quickly looks around, searching for where that voice came from, and finally sees someone in front of him. He wonders who this person is. This man looks at Arel and says, "Fufu?" Then strong energy begins around him. Arel feels that this is not just any ordinary person, especially because of the staff he was holding, as Arel could not exactly understand what it was. Then he yells and asks the man who he really is. The man just smiles, raises his staff, and fires a lightning cannon towards Arel and Kania. Arel, looking at this, thinks all this is very strange because he had just asked the man to introduce himself, and he simply attacked with clear intent to kill. But suddenly the attack splits open, and all the soldiers who arrive to help are defeated instantly, leaving Arel surprised by such strength. The man says that Princess Kania managed to dodge. Arel is disturbed because the man called the princess by name and clearly targeted her in that attack. The man laughs. The man yells and says, all this was just a little fun, so they should run away if they could, of course. He raises his staff again and begins to gather energy. Arel is frightened by the absurd amount of energy being accumulated there. Dark energy begins to envelop the place. Kania notices something and yells for Arel to quickly look at the soldiers who were lying down. As soon as he looks, the soldiers were standing up. The dead came back to life, including the wyverns. Arel looks at all this. The man yells, ordering all the undead to kill the princess and teach a lesson to Arel of the royal family, the power of the Dark Church. The undead start moving towards them. Suddenly the man notices something. Aurel was angry and thinks it was audacious to try to kill the princess like this. Errol fires at the man and hits him, making him scream in pain. Seconds later, another shot hits the man, causing him to die. Kanya doesn't quite understand what happened and asks Aurel what that was. Aurel, again trying to hide his power, says he might have died from the side effect of forcibly using a magical quantity he couldn't bear, but the undead were still there. Kanya's personal guard tells them to run quickly to the forest. Kanya asks why the undead are still attacking if the mage was already dead. Aurel says that probably the spell would last for a while longer. Aurel says they should get out of there. He yells that he would leave the rest to them. Finally, they manage to escape and reach the forest. Kanya asks Aurel if the soldiers would be okay. He replies that the mage was already dead, so the undead wouldn't last long. Probably, the soldiers were already coming to look for them, so there was no reason for Kanya to worry. Aurel tries to make fire using a stick and wood. Kanya says she thought Aurel just worked. Where had he learned to light a fire this way? He smiles and says he learned from a book. It's the principle of frictional heat, rubbing two flammable objects together. Kanya watches everything Aurel was doing closely, which makes him nervous because he could simply use his mana and quickly light the fire, but she was watching him, so he can't do that in front of her. Aurel's hands were already starting to hurt, but finally the fire ignites, leaving the princess impressed. Around the fire, Kanya sits down and, with a sad expression, says that all this was her fault. If she hadn't invented coming to the training, none of this would have happened. Aurel tries to console her and says it was no different from an accident. It's not her fault. Kanya asks Aurel if he wasn't scared while they were there. He stops for a bit and thinks he has been acting very maturely in recent months. Then he begins to pretend that he was indeed scared, saying he was just behaving correctly because he is a prince. So they had to endure. But the wyverns were scary. Kanya, seeing this, thinks she understood. So, he really was scared. Kanya places her hand over Aurel's and thanks him, saying it would have been a terrible day if he had not been by her side. Aurel starts looking at Kanya and thinks he hadn't noticed before, but she must have been very scared. Kanya, even trembling and in shock, was thanking Aurel. He realizes she must be heartbroken by the fact that the people escorting her lost their lives right in front of her. The members of the royal family are always at risk of being killed. But as it was the first time Kanya experienced that feeling, it's hard for her to just accept it. Kanya sits very close to Aurel and hugs him. As she hugged him, Aurel thought he would have to focus on keeping her safe while they returned. Suddenly they spot a wyvern and a griffin fighting in the sky. Kanya asks why they were fighting so late at night. Aurel says it seems there's a griffin's nest on the cliff, and the wyvern was trying to snatch the chick. The wyvern manages to bite the griffin's neck, which loses its strength, hits the cliff, and starts to fall. Aurel quickly grabs Kanya by the hand and runs away with her. The griffin hits the ground very hard, causing a cloud of dust to rise. This prevents Kanya and Aurel from seeing properly. As soon as the dust dissipates, Aurel sees the wyvern flying away. It's as if it sensed the smell of wyvern blood on their clothes. As soon as Aurel turns to the side, he notices that Kanya had disappeared. As soon as he looks forward, he sees her kneeling near the griffin. Aurel comes running and shouting for her to get away from it, as it could be dangerous, but she says it's okay, because the griffin was dead. Kanya, looking at the griffin, says it's unfortunate, and asks what they should do with its body. Aurel looks at her and asks if she is really thinking about burying it just because it's unfortunate. But Kanya says that's not it. She was talking about the chick, as clearly the griffin was trying to protect it until the end of its life. Aurel asks her what she was thinking of doing. Aurel says there's only one option and thinks that, although it might be a bit cruel, they should let nature take its course. Suddenly Kanya comes out all happy, shouting that they were going to raise it, which leaves Aurel surprised. As Kanya and Aurel were talking, their bodyguard and some soldiers arrived at the scene. The bodyguard says she is very happy that they are safe. Kanya smiles and says that they finally managed to arrive, and she was very happy to see everyone there. The bodyguard says it was really a terrible fight, but after the wizard was killed and the undead spell ended, no one died. As soon as she sees the grifflet in Kanya's hand, she becomes frightened and asks if that really is a griffin. Aurel says they arrived at a great time and asks them to do something to get Kanya to give up the idea of raising the griffin, But the bodyguard says that, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to do that. Kanya holds her grifflet and smiles. A week after the incident in the forest, everything was normal again, except for one thing. The griffin jumps on Arel's bed, waking him up and leaving him very scared. With this, Princess Kanya really rescued the griffin and was raising it. Now he is called Fly. Arel picks up Fly and says he really can't sleep with him around, but Fly makes a sad face. Arel puts him in his lap and smiles, saying he wouldn't fight with him because he was very cute and a good boy too. On that day of the attack, Arel takes the lead and asks the team to take Princess Kanya to a safe place, so she can rest a bit while he cleans the area so that the griffin's corpse doesn't attract other beasts. The guard agreed with this, and as soon as everyone started to move away and set up a camp for the night, Arel took his sword and cut the chest of the griffin's hand to take its magic core. With this, Arel would be able to tame the cub that Princess Kanya wanted to take, and it seems that everything was going very well so far. Suddenly Arel notices that someone was coming. It was Kanya, who was running and screaming, telling Fly that she had arrived. As soon as Fly sees the princess, he starts flying towards her. While Fly plays with Princess Kanya, one of the guards comes to Arel and starts saying that everything is already being done. Throughout the kingdom, an order has been issued for the Dark Church, the group that had attacked Princess Kanya. He points out that they also put a reward for anyone who had information about this matter, and probably something would soon appear. Arel, a bit irritated with this, tells the guard that the Dark Church are not the only people who were against the kingdom. Arel stops for a moment and wonders if he was too obsessed with material wealth. The guard, not understanding, asks what was going on. Arel says it was nothing important and tells the guard that he could leave. Meanwhile, Kanya still played with Fly. Finally, she managed to catch him. She looks at him with a loving face and says he needs to be a good boy when he grows up. Arel observes this from afar and thinks that they chose Princess Kanya as a target. She doesn't have a great influence, even though she is not at the center of power in the kingdom. She is still a princess, and this will happen. Arel thinks there is no way. He will have to do what he didn't want to. He will have to use his strength to protect Princess Kanya because she is different from other people in the family. She is like him. Arel wonders if he really needs to become a magic swordsman again. After some time thinking, he decides and sets his new goal, which is to become an aura specialist by his 20s. Arel goes to Kanya and asks if she wants to do something really fun. She smiles and asks what it would be. Then, two swords clash. Arel was focusied, training against Kanya. The two continue the training. Kanya is impressed with what Arel can do, even though he has never trained seriously, and asks what moves those were that he used. Arel smiles and says he used aura. Arel thinks it worked, his plan worked, and Princess Kanya bit the bait. Kanya comes running saying she wants to learn that too, and asks how Arel knew about it, if he had studied somewhere. Arel answers that yes, he did study a little. He puts a finger on his head and says that when it comes to using aura, the most important thing of all is the brain. Kanya starts crying, asking if, to use aura, one needs to be as smart as him. This disappoints Arel a little, but he tries to calm her down, saying she shouldn't worry, she just needs to pay attention to what he was doing. Kanya says the difference between them is that Arel was a genius, so he could do things more easily. Arel says it's not as difficult as it seems. She just needs to learn to control the aura with her brain. Arel says again that she doesn't need to worry, as he would give her all the attention and teach her everything she needs to learn. Kanya is very happy and excited about this, and asks if this is really serious, and if she would be able to learn this. Arel smiles and says that if she's a good girl, and uses what he is going to teach, she will quickly start using aura too. He thinks that, besides, there is a little secret that will make her learn faster as well. Arel knew this would happen, so over time, he always sent mana to Kanya without anyone noticing. On the other side of the door, the princess's bodyguard was at the door, listening to Arel telling Kanya to follow him and concentrate. She becomes curious about what is happening inside. Over time, Kanya would often go to Arel's house to see Fly and take the opportunity to train with Arel, both fencing and aura. And as a result, Princess Kanya quickly became an aura user at an unbelievable speed. Not even Kanya herself believed in the results she was having. She was fulfilled and happy, showing Aurel that she had finally managed to control the aura. Aurel congratulates her, saying that this is just the beginning, and tells Fly how amazing his owner is. Fly climbed on Aurel's shoulders, happy with Kanya, but now Fly was already big, so his weight made Aurel tremble. This is the side effect. Fly grew temporarily after being exposed to the powerful energy of aura training. Aurel cries for having to carry all this weight, even though he will become smaller when the effect of all this passes. He is still heavy. Fly begins to fly while holding Aurel. He takes the opportunity to start telling Kanya that what she managed to do is just the first step. She needs to train harder now, as the more mana she has, the easier it will be to control the strength and movement of the aura. Aurel says she could use the aura to the content of her heart while riding Fly in the future. Kanya smiles and says that Aurel really has a great imagination, but Aurel stomps his foot on the ground and emphasizes that it's not a joke. He is really serious. Kanya runs to Fly and asks him what he thinks, if this is true and if they should believe what Aurel is saying. Aurel just looks at the two and thinks that this day will come faster than she can imagine. Suddenly the door opens and someone says that His Majesty has arrived. Kanya and Aurel are shocked by this, wondering why the king himself was there. Aurel thinks something might be happening, as from what he knew, his father was very busy with preparations in the north, so he wouldn't be there just to get some fresh air. Aurel greets his father. He says he heard that lately Aurel was fond of fencing. Aurel answers that yes, but it's little. Besides fencing, he continues working on various experiments. Aurel emphasizes that he is taming Fly so that he can be used in border defenses later on. His father says he understands. Aurel is a little worried, as his father's expression changed. It seems he is satisfied. Aurel thinks that his father must be anxious about this, as in everything Aurel has been dedicated to, he has had great results and achievements. Suddenly the guards arrive with something in hand and place it in front of everyone. Kanya and Aurel are surprised by this. Aurel wonders what this is. Theorel stares at Aurel and says that this is his. He calls Aurel to take a closer look at it and emphasizes that it is unique in the world. It was made especially for him. Levana, a little worried, says that Aurel is still a bit too young for a great sword like that. Theorel agrees with Levana. However, he says he did not bring the sword there for his son to wield it now. However, as Aurel is the owner of it, he should at least touch it. But while the two were talking, Aurel effortlessly picked up the sword, leaving both his mother and father impressed. Aurel smiles and asks if he should practice his fencing from now on. Theorel looks at this proudly and thinks he never imagined that Aurel, who had no talent for martial arts, would be so happy with a sword. But suddenly, the sword begins to tremble and Aurel falls in front of everyone and gets a cut on his forehead. He thinks he has said it once before. He does not want to die by a sword. Aurel thinks he has already stood out in various aspects. If he shows all his real strength with fencing, he would be a nuisance to other people, as he would get directly involved in the power struggle. So, he decided to try his best to act as a younger and weaker brother during training with Princess Kanya. However, Aurel does not want to waste his efforts, so he urgently needs to think about how much he needs to get involved in this royal family dispute. He gets up and thanks his father for the incredible gift he received, but Aurel emphasizes that, as can be seen, his fencing skills are still that of a child. He apologizes and says that this sword would serve Princess Kanya better. On the other hand, Kanya did not expect this, so she is surprised and asks why. Shriel looks at her and thinks that there is no reason for her to be surprised by this, as she is evolving at an incredible speed. Not to mention that she is already in the class of aura practitioners. This is clearly enough for her to be treated as an elite in the kingdom. Aurel emphasizes that this does not apply to him, as he has much more experience than anyone else in this world. So for Kanya to come close to what he knows, she needs to improve infinitely. However, in this world, things are different, and at the pace the princess is going, it is only a matter of time before she reaches the class of aura specialist, where there are only 30 people in the kingdom. The evolution that Kanya is having is so remarkable that even the knights would be shocked, and that is why she deserves this sword. Aurel hands the sword to Kanya. Theorel begins to walk towards them, saying that he indeed understands what Aurel meant by all this, but there is a small condition. Theorel calls Princess Kanya for a fight, as he wants to see if she is really worthy of the abilities of this sword. Kanya is scared by this. Arel is shocked by his father's attitude, wondering what his father is doing. However, Errol begins to remember that his father has always been like this. Theorel keeps insisting and asks Kanya to show him what she can do with the sword. He emphasizes that she only needs to attack him, so she doesn't need to worry. Kanya is still shy, not knowing exactly what to do. Errol, seeing this, starts to think that it is normal for Kanya to be nervous in this situation. After all, their father is the king. Arel tries to help and touches Princess Kanya's back, saying that it's all right. She should take advantage of the chance she is having to show what she has been learning. Kanya, still scared by this, sighs. Arel makes a happy face and gives her a thumbs up, thinking that she should hit Theorel with the power of her heart. Kanya calms down and says that it's all right. The two get ready and face each other. Theorel is impressed and says that the princess's posture is different from the current knight's, and asks her if she created it herself. Arel is curious, as his father can notice this just by looking at the princess's preparation posture. Kanya, after the two stare at each other, raises her sword and says that her father should guide her during the fight. Kanya starts the contest by rushing at her father with surprising speed. A cloud of dust takes over the place. Levana cannot see and asks what is happening. Arel, watching the fight, thinks that this is going too well, as Princess Kanya's innate strength and high-performance mana have reached a speed invisible to the eyes of ordinary people. Kanya is focused and determined, and continues running without hesitation. Arel continues to cheer for her, but is a bit worried because the princess's first attack was aimed at her father's head. Arel can't understand because the sword is inches from Theorel's head, and he is looking at it with joy. Errol finds this father-daughter contest very scary. In the blink of an eye, Theorel manages to defend himself using his sword, causing a great force of impact and gusts of wind around the two. Kanya is impressed by her father's strength and speed. Theorel is surprised to see that Kanya was at this level, as it was a heavy attack. Theorel throws her back, making her fall to the ground, and says that not even the leader of the knights emanates so much aura when fighting against him. This is really amazing to see in a young Kanya, who was still on the ground, puts her hand on her shoulder and says that this is not entirely true, she still has a long way to go. Theorel goes to Arel and says he heard that all the fencing training that Princess Kanya has had was given by him, and asks if this is really true. Arel is speechless because he didn't expect this. He tries to get around it, saying it was nothing special, just that his theory had an effect. Errol begins to explain that, according to what he had learned in his research, the current fencing did not match well with Princess Kanya. Everything indicated that she had a talent for aura, so all he did was give her a little advice. Kanya and Theorel listen to this without saying anything. After hearing all this, Theorel says that if this was really the case, then it would be possible to teach this to other people. Arel makes a discontented face and thinks that the real reason for King Theorel's personal visit was this: a mass production of specialist-class aura knights. By spreading the training method to the knights, he must be wishing to create an invincible army that no other country could match. Errol thinks that he can't do this like this, so he bows and apologizes to his father, saying that if he expects the knights to have the same result as Princess Kanya, it might be difficult, as the princess was born with so much potential and, as they lived together around since they were little, Arel had all the time in the world to observe and remember every movement so that she could achieve her current growth. Theorel sighs, displeased with this, and says he understands. Arel tries to disguise and thinks that, to be honest, he could figure out the suitable training method for anyone and guide perfectly, just by looking a little at the person, but that would be too much work for him. Not to mention that he is not at all interested in spending all day observing the muscles of other men all day. Errol thinks that it's not right to completely disappoint his father like this, so he starts to say that, even if they don't have a training as suitable as Kanya's, it's still possible to make them stronger. Errol emphasizes that there is a small detail. He could only do this for the members of the royal family. He thinks that, even if he can't make them grow rapidly, giving suitable training methods should be enough. Theorel listens to this and thinks a bit about it and says he understands. Arel realizes that his father understood the real reason for this, as the other nobles are like hyenas to the king. This would only cause problems if he shared the secret method. Aurel smiles and thinks that there's no reason to make the other nobles stronger. Theorel says to Aurel that he understood and would respect his request, so only the royal lineage would have the teachings of the secret method. Aurel starts to think that this method will become something passed down from generation to generation in the royal family. It seems that Aurel's secret diary is becoming a national treasure. Aurel thinks that this is embarrassing, but they are the ones who will have to train hard, so just wait. A few months later, as the maids were passing by, they heard a loud noise. It was Theorel, who was all sweaty and surprised. Around him, everything was completely destroyed. He is surprised because the method was really working. He was finally reaching the level of a peak specialist. As one of the maids picks up Theorel's sword, he thinks that all of this was thanks to his son Aurel, as he created all of this from scratch and unfortunately cannot use it due to his weak body. Theorel thinks that somehow, Aurel needs this more than anyone else in the kingdom, so he as a father and king needs to do something. Sometime later, at Aurel's house, he shouts in surprise because his father had sent an exclusive knight for him. A person smiles and says that there were many knights who offered to be Aurel's escort. All of them were talented and handpicked by the king himself. The man places a pile of papers on the table. Aurel starts to look through the papers quickly and thinks that these people are from precious homes. A few years ago, they wouldn't even look at Aurel. He continues to look at all the names and papers and thinks that from what it seems, the impression they have of Aurel now has changed drastically. Aurel sits down again and continues eating while thinking that it seems that one needs to succeed to enjoy such a privilege. To be honest, as he is skilled, he wouldn't need a guard, as so far, there is no known man who would defeat him. However, he has no plans to show his real strength in the future. However, the previous incident may happen again. Princess Khania stands up and starts reading the papers and says that Aurel really is someone incredible. Aurel takes some papers in his hands and asks his butler if he could really choose 3 knights. As it was said, the butler runs and answers that yes, but the king said that if he wants, all of them would not be a problem. Aurel does not like this at all and says that he would not need so many people. As he reviews the papers, he thinks that being an interviewer is not bad. He needs to take into account all the abilities, including personality. He starts to look at each sheet and analyze each one carefully. Aurel starts to think that he should make the right choice and thinks that between 3 knights and 3 knightesses, he would obviously choose the 3 knightesses. He starts to laugh with the papers in his hand, which leaves the butler and Khania not understanding anything. Suddenly, Aurel gets up on the table with a pen in his hand and says that he is ready to start the interview. But as soon as he starts, he gets a little scared because it was not exactly as he thought. Aurel says hello to everyone while trembling in his chair. Everyone responds together and shouting. Aurel thinks he is slightly scared. It is a huge pressure he feels at the moment. He starts to cry inside, as much as they seem excellent knightesses. They were completely different from what he had imagined. One of them notices something strange and asks if Aurel was okay and if something was happening. He quickly responds that everything was fine. They didn't need to worry. Aurel thinks that he cannot show that he is dissatisfied with this, as they gave their lives and trained until they fainted to become excellent knightesses. Aurel takes a deep breath and says that it is time to stop being selfish, so he stands up and says that he would start the interview. He looks at all of them and thinks that all of them seem quite strong. One of them starts to say that she volunteered. Aurel looks at her and realizes that she is huge. He is impressed because she has more muscles than the king himself. He wonders if she is some kind of berserker. He thinks that he would clearly be safe with her as a bodyguard, but something catches Aurel's attention. One of the candidates did not seem to be a simple knightess, as her aura is of a noble lady. Compared to the others, she is different. After finishing the interview, Aurel thinks that there is no problem, as all of them answered the questions correctly and without difficulty. He says that he needs to think a bit about it, and asks for all of them to wait a bit outside the room. All of them lower their heads in respect to him and say that they will wait. As soon as they leave, Aurel starts to think that even if he is choosing them just to show off, as he would not need help, he still had to take this seriously. He takes a deep breath and says that he needs to choose correctly. Then, Aurel sits down and starts to concentrate and activates the Qigong 6 divine skills of origin creation. This is a secret technique that stimulates the brain to reveal abilities that people normally are unaware of. His eyes begin to glow for a while. This ability can only be acquired by reaching the level of an immortal Taoist who has trained for an entire lifetime. But it is quite easy for a person with the abilities that Arel possesses, as they live 100 lives. It had been a long time since he used this, but from what it seems, everything is working correctly. So it's time to start the second interview. Arel asks for them to enter one by one. The reason he is putting so much effort into this is because there are clearly people there who came with different intentions. After the first one enters, he notices something wrong and thinks he got what he wanted, so she was dismissed. The second one enters, and he notices the same thing, so he dismisses her without hesitation. At this moment, with this ability active, Arel possesses all the comprehension capacity, as the name itself suggests. With this ability, he can see through other people's minds and understand them. He can't hear the sound of their hearts, but he can see the color of their souls and emotions. Arel asks for the next person to enter. He thinks that even if they were not there to assassinate him, they could spy on him, so he must be careful when choosing someone. Arel thinks that besides Asha, there are no other knightesses that stand out, and he needs to choose at least two. He thinks about choosing that strong woman, the berserker. But suddenly the last person enters smiling. She introduces herself, saying her name is Sena Garil. This impresses Arel, as she also had a clean soul, not to mention that she seems quite sociable, but her experience seems limited. Arel picks up her file and says that according to what is written there, she was transferred not only to the border but also to distant fiefs. It seems that she has been in almost all the knight orders of the kingdom. Sena smiles and says that this is embarrassing, but it is just for personal reasons that she has traveled a lot. Arel thinks that she might be some kind of problematic child. He continues to analyze her carefully, and from what he can see, there are no major changes in her emotions. So it doesn't seem that she committed crimes in her past or anything like that. This makes Arel feel a bit more at ease and ignore the fact that she was transferred so many times. Arel smiles and wishes good work to all as the interview has ended. Arel says that he will officially announce the approved candidates and says that he is very much looking forward to working with the two, Asha and Sena. The two are surprised by this, and that's how the total number of members of the concubine's castle increased. Now, Arel walks with his two personal guards, leaving Asha aside for a while. Sena is totally serious when she is at work. Arel thinks that this is great, except for one thing. When the three of them reach an area, they ask what the reason for them being there is. Arel smiles and says that he really didn't know much about their abilities, so he brought them there so that they could show him. The two are a bit surprised by this. Arel thinks that although they are his knightesses now, it would still be a problem if they are still in the class of aura practitioners. They need to be strong, and it is for this factor that he needs to understand the abilities of the two first. Asha raises her hand and says that it is really important that he sees their abilities, but how he wanted them to show it. Arel smiles, excited, and says that they could fight each other. Sena smiles and says that she is willing to do anything, as she is now his knightess. Asha also agrees and says that it is fine by her. Arel smiles and thinks that a fight between people with similar abilities allows them to show all their strengths without any hesitation, but there was still a little help to make this happen. Arel makes an impressed face and says that he is eager to know which of them is the strongest, which creates a heavier atmosphere between them. Arel smiles and thinks that as long as they are knightesses, they should be proud of their own abilities. Sena cracks her neck and says she's really curious to know this too, and asks Asha if she also wants to know who is the strongest. Asha, very calmly, responds that she can't deny it, she also wants to know. The two stare at each other with determined looks. Arel, in the midst of this, seated on a stool, is loving all of this. He is excited to see how this will be resolved. Surely it will be a great fight. Sena starts to stretch and asks if there will be any rule they need to follow during the fight. Asha also stretches and says she prefers no rules, and asks Arel what he thinks. He thinks that, although he initiated it, they got quite excited about the idea. Arel says there will be no rules, they just don't need to hurt each other seriously. Sena smiles and says she will go easy. since she has more practical experience than Asha. However, she doesn't fall behind and responds that she doesn't need to do that, as she is also quite confident in her abilities, even though she thinks Sena wasn't just bragging when she said she had been in many places. Ariel starts to notice that the atmosphere is getting heavy and thinks that they are really not children. He wonders if they will really fight for real and gets worried. So he decides to emphasize that they shouldn't go too far. Although it's a fight to know the strongest, it's still just a demonstration of their abilities. As soon as he claps his hands, they should start fighting. As soon as he gives the signal, the two start fighting fiercely, throwing him away with the force of their blows. Errol gets up all dirty and thinks that he said they should go easy, although this is going a bit too fast. Errol understands their reasons, as this is what knights train for all their lives. The two were hitting each other hard, causing great pressure around them, but Arl decides to let it go, as he really needs to know the strength of the two. Arl is impressed with Asha's attacks, but something catches his attention, as Sena was accumulating a considerable amount of mana in her hand, and quickly defends herself from Asha's attack, striking the spear she was using. This confuses Arl, as Sena predicted Asha's attack with her eyes, and not with her senses. This seems like a wild animal. With that, Asha is left with her guard down and Sena sees an opportunity to attack, and, without thinking twice, quickly prepares to attack Asha. Arl continues to watch all her movements. He points out that it is difficult for Asha to defend herself, as she uses a spear, and as soon as the enemy approaches, it becomes almost impossible to defend with it. But suddenly Asha uses her legs and kicks quickly, preventing Sena from being able to strike her. This surprises Arl. He didn't expect Asha to have that mobility. Sena backs off and says that kicks are a bit too much. Asha says that what Sena is saying doesn't make sense. Arl asks why the two are taking this so seriously. The two meet again in the center of the arena, each of them exhaling a huge amount of energy. Arl realizes that this is starting to get a bit out of control, as their aura is quite dense. If they continue at this pace, they will only stop when they draw blood, so he decides to intervene and shouts for the two to stop immediately, as everything he saw is enough. The two stop immediately and look at him. Errol comes towards them and says that, thanks to this fight, he understood perfectly the abilities of both, and, from what he saw, the two still have a lot to improve. The two ask how they could improve. Arl begins to explain. First of all, Asha is very impatient because she focuses too much on her speed. As for Sena, she always seems confused because she is used to hand-to-hand combat. Asha says she heard that it was Arl who taught everything to Princess Kanya. She asks if he wanted to see their abilities to guide them as well. Arl thinks that Kanya really did very well. She became an aura specialist, and even among the royal knights she became famous. Arl responds that that's exactly it. Now that they have become his personal bodyguards, they should become stronger and stronger, or don't they want that? Asha says that there's no way to refuse that. Sena, embarrassed, says she just didn't want to bother Arl. He smiles and tells them not to worry, as it's no trouble at all for him, as he wouldn't lose anything by guiding his bodyguards. Arl walks away and shouts that, as long as they are by his side, they need to be strong. Therefore, Arl's exclusive night special training began now. Sena and Asha agree. Errol takes his two guards to a classroom. Sena raises her hand and asks if they were really going to train there, as she finds it a bit small for training. Errol says there would be no fighting training, he would just give some lectures there. Errol asks them if they are ready to start. He takes a book in his hand and smiles. This book is Errol's secret manual, an introduction to anyone who can become a knight. He thinks that if this training really works, he would sell this book to other knights. Asha takes the book and starts studying. After reading the book, she says there was one thing she didn't understand. Asha asks why she needs to circulate mana throughout her body to strengthen the aura. On the other hand, Sena is completely lost, saying she can't understand anything. RL, seeing the two, thinks that maybe he won't be able to sell this content. RL hits his chalk on the board and says it's okay. He already expected that they wouldn't change quickly with just the book. They say Errol is cruel. Errol begins to explain that the amount of mana that can be stored is basically different, and the acupuncture points of the body also, that is, there is a mana circulation path in it. In the case of Sena and Asha, they can say that the mana path is blocked at the moment. Errol points out that If they spend their strength trying to imitate aura without being careful, not only is it very wasteful, but it is also dangerous because if the circulation path is not properly open and it is forced. Ariel asks if they know what would happen. After a few seconds of silence, he hits the blackboard and says that everything would become chaos. Besides falling into the state of ki deviation, they would also not use the aura and instead become kind of a corpse. The two are scared by this. Sena even starts to tremble. Arl calls the attention of the two and says that what they need to do now is learn to naturally accept this huge energy in their bodies. He emphasizes that they need to accept and store this mana every day in their bodies and learn to make it circulate inside efficiently. Arl smiles and puts his hand on his chest, saying with great confidence that if they learn to do this, they will drastically change the way they use the aura. And that is a promise. Sena and Asha are excited about this, and say that this was already expected from someone as incredible as Arel. He takes off his coat and says that it looks like they understood, and then he would say the theory and the lesson that best suits each of them. He asks them to follow him. As soon as they arrive, Arel calls Sena and says he would start with her. He wanted her to learn more about how to focus the aura. She says she can use it very well and concentrates her aura in her hand. Arel looks at her and asks if she is able to do the same in the other arm and in both legs, all together. Sena starts trying and struggles a lot. Arl just looks at her while thinking. He already imagined that she would be able to use it in only one place on the body. Arl thinks that it is not difficult to envelop your whole body with aura, but first the person usually concentrates on the areas that need it, because with the rapid rate of aura consumption, it wears out quickly. This also applies to the Ki sword. After a few minutes, Sena falls sitting on the ground and sighs, saying it's not working. If she has to use it all over her body at the same time, her senses can't keep up. Arel smiles and touches his hand on both of her hands and says, they would do it like this now. Sena is a little scared by this, but it starts to work, and Sena's two hands start to be enveloped with her aura. Arl says it's easy to concentrate if you're aware of the temperature or touch of the body. It's kind of a trick. Arl asks Sena to concentrate her senses on the palm of his hand. She closes her eyes and concentrates. Arl says she needs to continue like this for just a little longer. As soon as Sena opens her eyes, she realizes that her two hands are enveloped with aura. She is impressed and happy with this. Sena starts to laugh and celebrate, saying she finally did it. She starts to caress Arl's hands, saying that his hand is extremely soft. She was even envious. Arl suddenly feels a chill. He asks Sena to stop fooling around and concentrate, and the aura becomes denser. Sena stands up with shining eyes and a smile and says that now she really understood. This is what happens when you touch the prince's hands. Arel falls to the ground upon hearing this and thinks that he must have taught wrong, but it doesn't really matter that much, because in the end, everything worked out. Arel is sitting on top of something and saying that Asha is a bit too impatient because in the previous fight, when Sena approached her, she kicked without thinking. Arl says he didn't expect Asha to act with a melee combat technique against someone who has better melee skills than her. He emphasizes that this is extremely wrong when it comes to fighting. It is important to be calm. Asha is all sweaty and exhausted. She asks if this is why she needs to do this kind of training. Errol on her back says that's exactly it. Asha stops walking, trembling a little, and says she can't feel anything but the weight of Prince Errol. He gives her a shake and says she needs to concentrate more until that feeling disappears on its own. Errol asks Asha to stay calm and concentrate as if there was nothing that could disturb her. Asha, all sweaty, says she understood. Meanwhile, in another place, in some castle, a woman receives a letter. Upon reading, she realizes that it is reports about the deeds of Prince Errol. She notices that lately he has many important deeds for the king. She thinks there is no need to worry about a small fly. However, by the way, he has become a big problem. The woman burns the letter and with a cold look says she will take care of it personally. The night begins to fall, and Asha is still training. The tree in front of her was split in half. Asha thinks this was already expected from a student of the prince. With his guidance, she feels she has become much stronger than before. Besides, the training is not very complicated, as soon as we understand how it works. But Asha keeps questioning herself if she really deserved to receive all this training from Arel, as he was from the royal family. While Asha Pernil belonged to the noble family, however, the family was bankrupt. So she questioned so much if she really deserved all this attention that Prince Arel was giving her. The Pernal family was not very rich, and as they lived quietly in the small field, they collapsed due to hunger caused by monster attacks. The head of the family, during one of the attacks, held the door while screaming for his family to run away from there, as the whole place would not last long. This man was Asha's father. While the family's maids dragged her out of the place, she struggled and cried trying to help her father, who was giving his life to save them. As she was taken out, her father shouted that he would leave the whole family in her hands. She needed to live and be strong, to continue carrying the family name. After some time, even the nobles who used to have a good relationship with the Pernal family turned their backs on them and, in the end of it all, Asha offered to join the Order of Knights to survive. Thanks to her talent in martial arts, she was able to quickly awaken her aura and was assigned to the royal capital. The 15th Order of Knights under direct command of the kingdom, the lowest ranking order that had only disgusting people. And the worst of them all was the commander of the knights himself, who was incompetent and lazy. Even being quite old, he was still an aura beginner who got his position thanks to the connections he had. He always spoke with Asha, saying that today he would give her special training, and tried to take her to some place where they were alone, and even tried to convince her to join him. But she did not feel comfortable or safe when this happened. Asha breaks another tree in half with great force. She sighs and thinks that the next time she met that man, she should split him in half. Asha thinks she applied to be the prince's bodyguard because she was desperate amid everything she was going through, and in the end, she was chosen by the prince. Asha looks at the sky and smiles, thinking that thanks to Arl, her life is improving a lot. She just needs a little more money to send her brother to school. All these good things happening in her life are thanks to Arl. She thinks she needs to do something to repay all this. In another place was Sena, who also says that her last chance would be to be the prince's bodyguard, as she was also desperate. One of the house butlers sees Sena and goes up to her, saying that she always wakes up so early. It's expected of the prince's bodyguard. She smiles and says that's not why, but because she's still not used to the new job yet. She smiles and waves to the butler and tells him to have a great day. Sena Garil comes from a family that had been mercenaries for generations. The place where she grew up was a mercenary tribe that did not belong to any country, since they moved from one place to another frequently. Even with all these changes, Sena was very happy with her family. One day her father called her to talk and began to say that, as she already knows, the last war against the Empire was more than 30 years ago. Although everything has become peaceful, the income of mercenaries was falling drastically. He emphasizes that a day will come when mercenaries like them will not have much to do, and, therefore, she needs to go out and see the whole world. He continues saying that he would take care of the old ones who insisted on continuing in this mercenary life, but young people like her should tread a new path in life. She smiles and says that she really can't go against her own father. She understood and will do exactly what he said. Sena liked to travel, and the night training was not difficult for her. However, there was an unexpected thing in her life. While Sena was on one of her travels, her father, who was in disagreement with the corrupted lord, ended up. Sena thinks her father was a bit silly. Not that she was different from him after all, like father, like daughter. Since she takes after him, she doesn't know how things work. She punched one of the men who worked with her very hard, making him hit his head hard on the table. She grabbed him by the hair and started yelling at him, asking if he was crazy and if the promotion he had received was making him blind, as he wanted to imprison innocent villagers as if they were bandits and even kill them. Sena couldn't accept this and asks if the man had no conscience of his actions. The man was almost fainting and screaming for help. Sena starts whistling and thinks that she doesn't regret her actions at all. To tell the truth, she even feels relieved about it. Sena was moving from one place to another and was deployed in dangerous areas. After wandering around, she offered herself as an escort knight, and that's when she was accepted by Prince Arl, who said he was happy and eager to work with her. Sena remembers the moments of training and escorting with the prince and thinks she was really lucky, not to mention that she is having good feelings about it. The prince may be lazy, but he is not arrogant, and whenever she looks at him she has a confused feeling, as his hands are so soft and fluffy that she wants to caress them. Sena turns red and thinks it's the first time she has felt this way, but that's not the most important thing. What really matters is all the kindness that Sena receives from the prince. This is something she will never be able to repay. Now she can be stronger thanks to his teachings. Both Sena and Asha say at the same time that they will do everything to protect the prince from anything. The two approach his house. Errol Ernesia, Although he is not good at martial arts and magic, still shows extraordinary talents in his studies. He was able to create all kinds of rare goods to enrich the finances of the entire kingdom. Moreover, he was even able to make the second princess rise to the level. She became an aura expert in a short period of time, just with Arl's instructions. That's why they call him the Great Gray Sage. This is Arl, who is currently lying in a chair, drinking his soda and smiling, while saying that nothing is better than doing nothing. Arl is currently 13 years old. He has been doing his best to do nothing. In the royal castle, there was a small meeting talking about the 14th birthday of the third prince, Arl. They emphasize that the coming-of-age ceremony is approaching. Count Tenvest says that Prince Arl has been excelling in many fields, so the coming-of-age ceremony will be a good opportunity for him. King Theorel asks what Count Tenvest meant by opportunities. Tenvest asks if there are still good properties available. Theorel asks if what Count Tenvest is suggesting is that Arel should get his own territory. Everyone at the table says that no one would be against it. Arel's achievements have been very relevant to the economy of the entire kingdom. King Theorel slams the table hard, and everyone is scared by this. The king thinks he didn't imagine that these bastards would try to send Arel away, using the coming-of-age ceremony as an excuse. Count Tenvest sighs and says that, besides all this, the name of the third prince circulates not only among the low-ranking nobles, but also in other countries. It seems that His Majesty wanted to make the third prince the next king. This makes Theorel completely angry. He stands up and punches the table again, but this time his hand is bubbling with anger aura. He yells at the count to stop talking nonsense, as he has said several times that the heir to the throne is the crown prince. Not to mention that Arel is not interested in the throne. Duke Gast raises his hand and says that the problem with this is that these rumors are already spreading to other countries, and young nobles are showing support for the third prince Arel, instead of showing it to His Highness, the crown prince. Public opinion is varying, and even if the two are not concerned, the king probably already imagines where this is going to lead. While Gast continues talking about the reign of the late king, Theorel immediately interrupts him and asks him not to say anything more. One of the servants arrives with a pile of papers. They say that these papers are just their opinions. Many nobles are worried that this will harm the order of the royal family. They are just wishing for the stability of the kingdom. Theorel starts looking at the pile of papers and thinks that these appeals are all the same. They are determined to change the king's opinion. They are doing this so that Arel ends up going to a distant place. This is the problem with nobles. The king sighs as they continue saying that the king should not disregard their goodwill. King Theorel says he understands and will take the idea into consideration, and if anyone has a good indication of a territory, they should make the indication in his house, in his room. Arel was reading a letter. He says he wanted to know what happened during the meeting. So, that's really how it ended? Arel throws the letter on the table and lies back in the chair and wonders, so they want him to have a territory just for him? But Arel knows that this is just a big excuse. They just want to keep him away from everyone, for fear of the achievements he has been bringing to the kingdom. But suddenly, Arel puts his hand on his face and starts to give a slight smile. Then he jumps on the chair, laughing his head off, and shouts that he will finally have his own territory. In fact, all this was a plan that Arel had made. Each of his achievements was thought out so that this day would come, as he doesn't care about the throne. All these aristocrats are nothing but terrorists. Arel was very happy because having his own territory is 100 times better than being surrounded by those hyenas. He shouts so much that he will have his house, his territory, and will be able to rest in peace that it can be heard from outside his house. He finally did it. Fahilia Norte is a place where it is always snowing, practically all year round. This place is really dangerous, because if you visit a place like this unprepared, you will surely freeze to death. Arel is a bit discouraged because it is quite difficult to cultivate in such a hostile environment, but it seems that the nobles have already decided. But Arel is not discouraged. He closes his book and thinks that he will have to leave in a month after the coming-of-age ceremony. He will be there for a year and a month, so he needs to have everything ready by then. There are many people in front of him at this moment. Arel is sitting at his desk and says that, as everyone there already knows, being independent of other territories is no joke. This is only for those who are truly ready. Arel emphasizes that, for the rest of them, he will help look for other positions. Those who follow him need to act with precision. Everyone is encouraged by the words of Prince Arel. He sighs and thinks that, apparently, the team of alchemists and most of the others want to follow him. regardless of where he goes. Sena sighs and asks why it had to be Fahelia. Arl asks if there is something wrong with that. Sena says it's nothing serious. She had lived there for a year. Arl remembers that Sena has been through all the danger zones. Sena says that it is not a dangerous place, but it is an extremely cold place. Arl asks if that's really all. She says there are not many monsters there. As she said, it's not a dangerous place, but she was trying to speak in a more pleasant way. Arel realizes this and thinks she doesn't need to do that kind of thing, but what really matters to Arel is the fact that Sena reacted like that. This means that it really is a very cold place. He can perfectly understand why the nobles want him to go to that place. Arel lies back in his chair and says it's okay. In fact, this is better than he had imagined. This leaves Sena and Asha not understanding anything. How was he happy with an extremely difficult place to live? Arl says that in fact, he thought they were going to send him to a worse place, like a place full of all kinds of ferocious monsters, or some place where he would be roasted whole by dragons. Arel emphasizes that just cold is nothing serious, as he really expected to be sent to an extremely dangerous place so that he would disappear. Thus, the nobles would be able to get rid of him. As soon as Arl looks forward, Sena and Asha were almost crying. He asks why they were looking like that. They start saying that they would protect him in any way. No matter what happens, they would be there. Arl tells them to wait a second, as they were misunderstanding everything. Outside the room, Asha asks Sena why she is not honest. Sena turns around and asks what Asha meant by that. Asha says it's about the previous topic. Sena asks if she really had noticed, and apparently Arel had also noticed. She starts saying that she really told the truth. It's an extremely cold place and there's nothing there. It's like a frozen desert. Sena emphasizes that the reason the knights camped there for a year was to escape from the monsters that couldn't withstand the severe cold. Asha hears this and is a bit worried. Sena smiles and asks if she prefers to stay there. Asha turns around and asks Sena to stop joking. She emphasizes that she would follow Arel even if it were the worst place in the world, but she says she didn't expect them to expel him in this way. Sena thinks for a bit and says they don't need to worry too much about it. Asha asks why. Sena says Asha will realize it when she looks into the prince's eyes. He is too confident, probably has a perfect plan for such an occasion. She emphasizes that she has never seen any kind of frustration in Arel's eyes, and that's why Sena thinks they will all be fine. Asha says she understood everything and decides to send a letter to her hometown. Sena takes the opportunity and says she will do the same. Meanwhile, in his room, Arel doesn't stop for a minute. He finally finished the documents and his project is looking very good. He leans back in the chair with his hand on his head and sighs deeply while wondering what he will do with his mother. As much as she hasn't said anything so far, he imagines she is heartbroken. Arel starts pacing back and forth inside his room. He says that even though he asked no one to tell his mother what the territory he would be taking care of is like, he is worried about her being there alone and with the attack that happened with Kanya. He stops for a moment and thinks that he needs a means of contact. It could be an ultra-long-distance communication sphere, magical teleportation circles, or magic scrolls. He wonders if he should hire a mage exclusively for him. Arel leans on the desk, sighs, and says that he needs to think more calmly about this. For now, his priority is the preparations for moving. He wonders if that land is not the perfect place for a former professional like him to live carefree. First step towards Arel's independence. He calls the team of magicians, who arrive asking how they can serve him. Arel looks at everyone inside and asks Payan if they were all the disciples he had. They all salute the prince. Arel thinks that he wanted a useful mage, but he didn't imagine that a familiar face would appear. Arel looks at Payan and asks him to keep all this a secret. Payan says it's okay. He swears he won't reveal it to anyone. Arel places a paper on the table and says it's nothing much. He just needs Payan to make one item, but it needs to be done as soon as possible. Payan takes the paper in his hands and thinks that since it's just one item, it must be something unusual. As soon as he looks at it, he is astonished. He looks at Arel and shouts, asking if it was really Arel who drew that there. Arel, very relaxed in his chair, says that it was him indeed. It's an improved version of that artifact that activates the brain, called the Sage's Necklace. Payan keeps looking at the paper in disbelief. He thinks that according to the drawings there, the effect is twice as great compared to what already exists, and is 1/10 cheaper than the current one. Payan can't believe how the prince managed to do this. Arel asks Payan if he can handle making it, or if it's too difficult. Payan replies that the project is perfect, and thanks to that, he can make it if he has the necessary materials. Payan says there is just one problem. He knows the creator of the original artifact, so he doesn't know how to act about it. Errol looks at him and thinks that it seems he is hesitating to make an improvement on the artifact created by someone else. Errol opens the drawer of his desk and thinks he will end all this hesitation now. He takes a bag out of the drawer and says that this is the fee to keep this a secret. Payan is curious to know what is inside the bag, but Errol places another bag on the table, both full of coins. He says that the first one is just to keep this a secret and the second one is for the materials and his labor. But suddenly Errol keeps putting several bags full of gold coins on the table, saying that he is being generous. In addition to all this, he will give tips for future transactions. Payan is impressed with so much money. He bows along with his disciples and shouts to Prince Errol that he would take care of everything. Errol thinks that, as always, money is the best way to keep people at his feet. Errol is happy and celebrates, saying that he is looking forward to working with everyone there. He emphasizes that he needs this project for this month still. Payan says that they could leave it with them, that they would start immediately. Errol thinks that giving that amount of money to Payan was really a good choice, as from now on he could always count on him. A few days pass and Payan returns with the necklace, saying they made the Grey Sage's necklace. Errol shouts and asks them not to call him the way they want. Errol takes the necklace and looks at it, impressed that they finished it in just 10 days, not to mention that the quality of the necklace turned out very good. He says it really turned out well, but now he wants Payan to make it in bulk. Payan asks how many he was thinking. Errol shows 5 fingers. One of the disciples is startled, thinking that if he really wanted 5 of those, but Errol smiles and says that he would only need 50 of those, for now. All the magicians are astonished, but Payan says he understood and tells them to leave it with them. Errol starts laughing and thinking that if they think this is unfair, they should try living 100 lives in a carriage. Errol and Asha were traveling. Asha asks where they were going, and if Errol needed anything. He just had to ask. Errol says it's nothing much, but he needed to choose for himself this time. Asha doesn't quite understand and asks if he was thinking of buying something. Errol replies yes, the place they are going to is the slave market. Asha is disheartened when she hears this. She screams asking if they were really slaves and says that the prince could not do such things. Errol doesn't understand and asks what she was saying. Asha screams again, saying that he was becoming obsessed with power. Errol still doesn't understand and asks what she was talking about. She starts to say what she was thinking. The image in her head was of Errol beating the slaves while smiling, telling them to work while calling them useless. Because useless pigs like them can't work properly, they won't receive a piece of bread. First, we need to fill these 1,000 boxes now. Errol starts screaming and says he's not like that, and asks her to stop imagining those things. Errol gets angry, and asks how she dared to think that of him. Asha apologizes to him. Errol asks what kind of image comes to mind when it comes to the slave market. A hell full of screams. People crying after being separated from their families. But in fact, the answer is totally different. Errol is surprised, as it is much cleaner than he expected. Asha says that if any slave had some strange disease, it would be a big problem. And that's why management needs to be strict. Errol says he understands. A man approaches them and says, that's exactly right, and they could say that there was the most excellent and complete management service, as this place deserves to be called the largest slave markets in the capital. He bows and introduces himself, saying it's a pleasure to meet the prince in person. His name is Ian. He is the owner of the slave market. Errol smiles and says he doesn't need to be so formal. After all, he was there as a simple customer. Errol asks Ian if he has heard the story. Ian smiles and says he doesn't need to be so polite, then he asks Errol to follow him. They start walking around the place. Ian begins to say that, as he can see, they followed legal procedures and, therefore, Errol could buy and sell slaves there. Errol, seeing this, begins to understand how it really worked and asks if it's really like that. Ian replies that yes, everything is done correctly and, therefore, he doesn't need to worry about anything. Asha explains to Errol that the people who were enslaved, there were people who couldn't pay their taxes, or people from noble families who went bankrupt and lost their value. Errol asks if there is some kind of law that, as soon as families are ruined, people become slaves. Asha explains that it's not like that, but people who prefer to become slaves don't go hungry. Ian says that's exactly right. Most of the slaves were like that. Of course, there were also thieves and criminals, but there's no need to worry about that. Errol thinks that maybe because they knew he was going there, The criminals were separated from the other slaves, but that's not relevant to him. Ian sits in his chair and asks what kind of slaves Errol was looking for. Errol says he wanted many of them. Ian is overjoyed, as the sale would be big. Then he asks how many the prince needed. Errol says he needs 150. This leaves Ian speechless. He starts looking quickly at the sheets on his desk. Errol asks if that's too much for them. Ian replies that no. They have facilities with slaves outside the capital, so the quantity would not be a problem for them. Ian asks why Errol wanted so many, but Errol laughs and says not to worry. It's not to do something strange, but he needs to have a requirement to make regarding the slaves. Errol emphasizes that he wants several slaves in groups of 4 to 5 people who are family members, neighbors, or close acquaintances. Ian is a bit puzzled by this. He says it seems quite complicated to achieve, but it's not uncommon for entire families to be enslaved. He snaps his fingers and some men appear with stacks of papers. They put them all on the table. Ian asks what Errol thinks of this. Errol starts looking through the papers and asks them to help choose those who can at least read. He also asks Ian if he can send the slaves to any place he chooses. Ian replies yes, just choose the place and they will send them. Errol is satisfied and says they have a deal. Errol snaps his fingers and asks Asha to bring the money. Errol emphasizes that he intends to work well with Ian. Asha throws a bag of money on Ian's table, who is extremely happy with the amount of money. He starts laughing a lot and says he will do his best to serve the prince as a VIP in the future. Errol smiles again and says that, as always, money is the best. Asha just sighs inside the carriage. Asha asks what the prince was thinking of doing with so many slaves. Errol was looking out the window while thinking. He turns around smiling and says he was thinking of making them residents of his new territory. Where they were going is why he needs so many people. There are not many people living in the territory. What's the point of pretending to be a lord in an empty place? Errol takes his necklace and says he would give it to some slaves. A total of 50 artifacts, 1 for each family. And with that, he would be able to educate all of them. Thus they would become quite useful. Errol asks what Asha thinks about this. She replies that she would never have imagined that this was the real reason why the prince was wanting slaves. Errol scolds her and says that's why she should stop thinking strange things about him. Errol emphasizes that he has no intention of living quietly there. He would do everything to make his territory prosper and become as good as possible. Asha is impressed by the prince's determination and kindness, but all this was being planned so that, in the future, Errol would live with the maximum comfort possible on his lands. Everything was for the sake of his comfort. Errol thinks he would teach and train these people a lot so that they could work well, even in Fahilia. He was determined. He would make a paradise, even in a hostile place. Back at his home, Errol was lying in his bed, somewhat disheartened, as the biggest difficulty in preparing to live alone would be having to say goodbye to his family and his home, where he lived all his life. Someone knocks on the bedroom door and asks if Errol had time. He replies yes and asks the person to come in. It was his mother, with tears in her eyes. She enters and runs to Errol and hugs him tightly. While holding him in her arms, she asks if it wouldn't be better if she tried to talk to the king again. Errol just stays quiet for a while, thinking that his mother was really sad. Errol starts to say that she doesn't need to be so sad and worry about him, as he would visit her frequently and send many gifts to make her happy. He emphasizes that there is still a year left, so she doesn't need to cry like that. She leaves the room crying. Errol waves with a smile on his face to show that everything is okay. As soon as she leaves, he starts thinking that he really would have to keep secret where he was really going. As soon as everything was ready in his new home, he would tell her everything. But for now, he would make her feel safe. Meanwhile, in the training room, one of the soldiers was flying away with an explosion. Someone was out of control, leaving all the guards scared. This person was screaming that they could not accept this. Never. They would not accept it. They were completely irritated by it. It was Princess Kanya who was screaming non-stop that she would never accept. She looks at the soldiers she trained with and asks for the next one to enter the training room. She asks them to come with all the strength they have, otherwise they might get hurt. She was furious. The soldiers were trembling with fear of her. As she trained, she wondered why Errol had to leave like this, just because those nobles want to keep him under control. She says she can understand the situation Errol is in, but she can't accept it. But what irritates her the most is that the unacceptable thing about all this is that it was only after half a year that he told her. Why did he only say it now? She delivers a blow so strong to her opponent that it throws him with great force into the wall, making the wall crack all over. She calms down a bit and sighs, and thinks that he did it because he knows he can't change fate, but in fact, Aurel didn't say anything before because he was afraid of how she would react. Kanya grips her sword tightly, lowers her head, and says she can't just let him follow his fate like this. The guards start to notice something wrong and see that the aura emanating from Princess Kanya is different. At the moment, a large amount of aura is coming out of her. If the person keeps pushing this strong emotion, the mana inside the body will flow more naturally, but at a faster pace. Extracted from Aurel's Introduction to Anyone Who Can Become a Knight, Kanya turns with a cold and angry look and asks for the next one to enter. On that day, the youngest swordmaster and the third swordmaster in the history of the kingdom were born. Everyone who faced her was thrown away. The cause of this event was the obsession and irritation of Princess Kanya with her younger brother, Prince Aurel. But of course, no one will know that. Suddenly Aurel remembers his first life. He wondered if it was the same feeling he had back then, before joining the army. Time passed quickly, like melting snow. From the day Aurel received his enlistment notice to the day he enlisted, time flew by in the blink of an eye. Aurel feels a bit uncomfortable with this feeling. He wonders if it's because he's preparing for his independence. Currently, Aurel is 14 years old, and his coming-of-age birthday feast is in full swing. People approached Aurel to congratulate him, but he didn't see any sincerity in them. He just wanted everyone to go away quickly. However, he smiled and thanked them for their words, even though he found it all very boring to do. Aurel notices that, compared to his first birthday, there were many nobles present today, and he didn't understand why they were all there. People continued to approach him. Aurel kept a smile on his face, but he thought that when he was a baby, he could pretend to be asleep, but now he couldn't anymore. Even a handshake from an idol wouldn't be this tiring. The nobles there smiled and celebrated, saying that not only they but all the citizens were happy for this day. But the truth is that their happiness really came from this day. But not because Aurel was turning another year older, but because he was being sent to the field. Aurel was fed up with all this. He didn't want to stay there listening to this anymore. He thinks it's very boring to listen to these presumptions. People with fake smiles continued to do the same. Aurel was at his limit and wondered if he should use his strength and turn everything upside down. But suddenly his mother appears and waves to him. Aurel calms down and thinks he needs to behave because his mother was there and watching, so he should behave. Aurel crosses his arms and looks at the nobles, thinking that after a month, he wouldn't need to see this bunch of trash again. He would just be merciful and let them escape with their lives. Elia appears congratulating Aurel. She covers her face and says she heard the whole story. She really doesn't believe he's already an adult and will be leaving for his own territory. Elia says that Liviana must be very sad. Aurel smiles and thinks that the worst aunt in the kingdom was there to test his patience. However, he doesn't lose his composure and starts to say that it's not quite like she's thinking. He lowers his head in respect to her and says that, since it would be something he'd have to do one day, he's happy that the opportunity to contribute to the kingdom has come so early. Elia doesn't like this at all. She covers her mouth again and smiles, saying it's true. She points out that Zayli would also miss him. Thanks to Aurel, Zale's sword skills have improved a lot. She calls a maid and says that Zale will always be grateful for that. Elia says that even though it's something insignificant, she would like to give him a gift. Aurel wonders what this gift might be. Aurel doesn't trust her much and is a bit worried. Suddenly, the maids put a coat on him. Elia says it's a coat made of fox fur from Fahilia. As soon as Aurel sees the coat, he thinks he knew it. She was behind everything. Aurel had already thought about this before, except for the fact that Zayli is not the type to keep his half-brother under political control. The person who has the power to manipulate the entire aristocracy and count on their support to boost territorial advancement is quite obvious who it could be. Aurel looks at the coat and thinks that still, what a dirty personality. He wonders if she was mocking him as soon as she gave him this coat. Aurel starts to get irritated again. His hands start to tremble, but he thinks that if he gets angry, he would end up being a jerk and might have big problems with the kingdom. So he continues pretending and opens a beautiful smile on his face, saying that he had already exchanged greetings with his older brother, even though they were distant, since the same royal blood runs in our veins. Aurel says that when his older brother needs help, he will definitely rush to help him. She smiles upon hearing this and says that Aurel is very kind. Errol smiles back, saying that she flatters him. The two continue smiling and pretending everything is all right, but neither of them likes the other. Arl says that in seconds he could rip her head off and anyone who gets in the way, but he can't do that here. Thus, Arl asks that the day to be honest with each other never comes, because if it does, he wouldn't hesitate to do such a thing. Arl goes to the balcony and leans against it, thinking that finally, this boring banquet is coming to an end. But then he stops and thinks he's forgetting something. As he looks back, he sees Princess Kanya all dressed up. He thinks she's been keeping quiet lately. Errol thinks it's expected, as she is still angry at him for forgetting to announce his independence. He thinks he needs to apologize to her before heading to his territory, but Errol notices something strange on Princess Kanya's face. She says it's all right, but she is clearly annoyed. Arl starts to worry and wonders what's wrong with her. Suddenly, he wonders what decision she has just made to have that expression. She turns and runs away from there. Arl is scared, as he is feeling, and everything is strange. He feels the solemnity of a master who has just made the biggest decision of his life. Arl already imagines that Princess Kanya will cause some trouble. She goes up to her father, who is drinking a glass of wine, and calls him at once. Theorel is even startled by this. He turns and tells Princess Kanya that he doesn't know what she wants to talk about, but now wouldn't be a good time. They would talk about it later. The people around were looking. Kanya was determined and says no to her father. She was going to do this now. She stares into her father's eyes and says that in a month she would follow Arl. The nobles there choke on Princess Kanya's words. Outside on the balcony, Arl is completely speechless and thinks the bomb has really exploded. He wonders what she is doing and why she is doing it. Arl looks at Princess Kanya's mother and wonders why she isn't doing anything to try to calm Kanya down. But as soon as Arel sees her face, he realizes she couldn't stop Princess Kanya. King Theorel starts to get annoyed with this. A dense and strong aura was coming out of his body. He looks at Princess Kanya and says that her joke is going too far. Theorel asks Princess Kanya what she means by following Arl. Meanwhile, Arl is just watching from a distance. He thinks the king shouldn't have done that because Kanya would come out stronger if he continues with this. But Arel is also curious to know why she wants to follow him. Kanya looks at her father and screams that she has become a knight of Arel. As soon as Arel hears this, he punches his own face. Theorel says this is going too far. It's not easy to become a knight no matter how much Kanya tries to learn fencing. But Princess Kanya screams back that this is not true. She can do it. She emphasizes that she reached the master swordsman level not long ago. The nobles around hear this and are astonished. Arl is impressed because she is really telling the truth. Theorel says it's hard for him to believe because she's only 19 years old. The only person in the history of the entire kingdom who achieved this at that age was the late king. Princess Kanya gets annoyed and takes a sword from one of the guards. She says that if her father doesn't believe her, then she will show him right now. She starts to concentrate, and an aura begins to run through the sword. She yells for everyone to back away from her immediately. The aura begins to expand throughout her body and rise with an absurd density. The glow was so strong that some people there had difficulty looking directly at her. Kanya prepares to attack and screams. As soon as she attacks, a strong beam of light comes out, crossing the entire room. She cuts the cake table and everything with the power of her aura. Errol goes crazy seeing this, as he still can't understand, even though she's strong like this, why she's doing this. Everyone is impressed by the strength she has. The nobles begin to say that she really became a master of the sword. Everyone starts to celebrate the strength and achievements of Princess Kanya. She turns again to her father and says that she has been thinking all this time. She bows and says that Arl has received his property and will soon leave, while she will end up marrying someone she doesn't even know. If that's really the case, she prefers to choose the path of a knight herself. Arel looks at all this without saying anything, but inside, he's crying with joy, thinking that normally he would cry and clap for Kanya. However, the place and the situation don't allow it. Arel thinks that she is renouncing being a princess in front of a bunch of aristocrats. Even if she said that this is just a joke, the consequences would not be a joke. Everyone continues to look at this and starts to talk among themselves. Princess Kanya continues to bow before the king with a somewhat strange expression. Arel wonders if she chose this place on purpose. He starts to freak out because now that things have turned out this way, it won't be easy to fix. He starts to ask himself who was the idiot who taught her these tricks. However, he stops for a moment and thinks that it was he himself who taught her the power of fencing. Arel thinks that this is not the time. He needs to do something to try to stop her. Arel begins to speak, but Kanya interrupts him and tells her father that if what she showed wasn't enough, she would show that her determination is sincere. Arel falls silent, and Princess Kanya begins to walk. She raises her sword and places it near her chest and kneels before Arel and begins to say, "The sword that was trained in this life, and the sword that will have to be trained in the future, in this place." She swears that she will dedicate to Arel. She swears to stand by his side and defeat all the difficulties in her path with her sword. Arel is speechless, just looking at her. Kanya drops the sword and holds Arel's hands, saying that from this moment on, she, Princess Kanya Ernisia, promises to be his knight. This is the knight's vow. Arel continues to say nothing and is a little impressed by Princess Kanya's determination. Arel looks at her, thinking that it's hard to say that this is a formal oath, as Kanya is a princess and does not have the title of knight, and most importantly, there is no consent from him. But that's not even the main problem. The bigger problem is that all the nobles were there looking at the two of them. The oath of a knight is not something that can be considered a joke. Moreover, the person who has reached the rank of Master of Aura is making such an oath, so no one has a choice but to accept that the oath was really made. Arel puts his hand on his head and sighs, because he just realized that all this was part of her plan. While Kanya is kneeling looking at Arel, she thinks that she is not doing this just because she is concerned about Arel, but also to open paths for herself. Arel looks at everyone and thinks that it's really very funny, because everyone's expressions are no joke. King Theorel is completely shocked by this. Kanya's mother even sat on the ground, shocked by the situation. And most importantly, the beautiful evil aunt was completely irritated by this. Arel thinks that she thought she had gotten rid of the long-standing annoyance. However, now the situation is delicate and this is certainly putting her in a bad mood. Arel says that if it were another case, he would laugh in her face. But at this moment, he's almost crying too. Arel looks at this and thinks that he had thought this when he turned 1 year old. His birthdays never end in a normal way, and that's why he doesn't want to have another birthday feast anytime soon. There are some commotions, but time continues to pass. Things were being arranged in their carriages. Arel picks up his suitcase and says he will say goodbye now. His mother goes near him and says that time really passes very fast, as it seems like he was born yesterday. But he's so big now. Arel smiles and says he promises to visit her frequently, so she doesn't need to worry too much. His mother says that she is really worried, she and Chena, his former nanny, because he never cried so much since he was little, but still grew up peacefully. This surprises him as he thought that crying little would make him a great baby. It seems he still has a long way to go. His mother looks angry at him while holding his hand and says that he has a weak body, and therefore if he gets sick, he needs to ask for help immediately. He smiles at her and says he already knows that. Arel asks her once again not to be so worried. He takes the opportunity to start talking about the land he is going to, but his mother interrupts him and says that she already knows where he was going. Arel is surprised by this, as he did not imagine that she knew even that, as he made sure to keep it a secret all this time. She scolds him and asks if there is any mother who doesn't know where her son is going. He feels a bit embarrassed and scratches his head while thinking that even a former professional like him is helpless in front of his own mother. She runs to hug him and says that, as it's about him, no matter where he goes, she knows he will do well in any situation. This leaves Arel with no answers to give. She hugs him tightly and says, that's why she's not going to say she's worried anymore. She just asks him to stay safe because she loves him very much. Arel's eyes start to tremble and fill with tears with these words from his mother. Arel closes his eyes and says he will be fine, and asks his mother to always take care of her health too. Independence is the separation between parents and children. Even though he can come back frequently, it's something very sad to do. And so, the two say goodbye. Arel departs for his new land, facing the cold and snow on his way, the northernmost part of the kingdom on the map, a frozen land located under the icy mountains. Arel puts his face out to see how it was, but the wind and cold are too much of a hindrance. Arel starts to think that he was going to the ice continent that no one has ever recovered. He thinks about ways to work, but the ground was so hard it would break the tools. He thinks that the nobles who sent him to this place are joking. They really want him to die. He keeps his head out of the window and shouts that those nobles should just wait, because even if they threw him into a volcano with lava, he would still make it his comfortable paradise. He puts his head back inside. Kanya looks at him and asks him to stop playing and close the window. Aryll closes the window and thinks it was worth spending money heating magical tools. This made everything warm, even this hateful coat. Princess Kanya says the carriage is very warm, so Aryll has nothing to complain about. She asks how much he spent to do this. He looks at her and thinks he still doesn't know if Kanya is in her right mind. How can she wear the dress she used to wear in this cold place? Aryll uses his powers and looks at Kanya. He realizes she is using her mana as thermal insulation. He thinks he never adored her something like that. This makes him wonder if she's doing this by instinct. Aryll sighs and smiles, saying his sister is frighteningly talented. She gets a bit confused and asks if this isn't normal, and if anyone couldn't do the same. Aryll asks Kanya to tell this to her escort knights outside. Probably the two of them will cry with this. Aryll changes the subject and stops joking, and asks if Kanya really wouldn't regret coming to a place like this. She doesn't quite understand the question, and gets annoyed, asking if he really hates her following him so much. Aryll just turns his face without answering that, but Kanya grabs him by the cheeks. He says it's not that, he's just asking if it's okay for her to follow him. Theorel and Aryll were quite worried about this, but Kanya had decided to follow him under the name of Knight's Apprentice. He even put his mind to think together with the Sing all day to try to come to an agreement, but it was no use. Princess Kanya was completely decided on what to do. Everyone tried to stop her, but she insisted on following Aryll. She gets closer to Aryll and says that she would never regret it. He asks if she is serious. Kanya releases Aryll and says that she actually thought of it as a great opportunity. Aryll doesn't quite understand what she meant by that and asks her what opportunity that would be. Kanya asks if she hadn't already told him before. She lowers her head and says that if she had stayed in the palace, she would have gotten engaged soon after. Aryll replies that it's very likely. He thinks that Kanya is turning 19 this year, and the fact that she hasn't gotten engaged at this age is surprising in itself. She sighs and says that although the date has not yet been decided, Aryll begins to understand everything and thinks that's why she chose to follow him like this. Aryll thinks that Princess Kanya is exactly like him. She doesn't want to be restricted, so it's natural that she made this decision. She leans on the window and says that she will seek her freedom from now on. Aryll asks who her partner would be. Kanya says she didn't know, as she had rejected it before even hearing the name of who it was. Aryll makes a strange face and thinks it's lucky that they didn't end up together, as even a nobleman would have difficulty dealing with her strong personality. As they continue their journey, Aryll thinks he doesn't know who the wretch is, but that person should thank him. Or maybe not. A few hours later, they finally arrive at Prince Aryll's castle. He and his guards enter smiling. Currently, Aryll has 1,000 soldiers, 200 slaves who will be the residents of this place, and lastly, the alchemist entourage and maids. Aryll smiles and thinks that it's time to start building his own empire. First of all, command over the military of Fahilia was basically assumed by Asha and Sena, who took care of everything. As for Princess Kanya, although it's a shame, Aryll doesn't want to entrust her with any work. The reason for this is what they would do if the Knights' barracks collapsed one day with her in charge. As soon as Kanya sees the snow, she runs out happily, while Aryll just looks at it. Thinking that considering this is what she's doing as soon as they arrived, it doesn't seem like she'll care too much about it either. Aryll goes to his room and sits in his chair and wonders if it's really time for him to start working. The total population of Fahilia is about 10,000. They live in 12 villages. Aryll starts thinking about the best ways to connect all the villages while he reads the books. He thinks that most of them are hunter-gatherers who have lived there since their ancestors. There have been no new residents for decades, and the population continues to decrease. This makes Aryll realize that this place is not just poor, but also on the path to total ruin. The royal palace does not charge taxes from this place. They just put this place on the exemption list and completely ignore it. Aryll sighs deeply and thinks, who the hell was the former lord for this place to end up in this situation? He lies back in his chair with a book in his hands. There was the accounting record. Aryll starts reading and realizes that it was an ambitious attempt to recover this land. As the deficit was very high, the former lord borrowed money from other territories, and thanks to that, he went bankrupt. Aryll gets angry and throws the book away and shouts that this is a complete joke to him, as he was thinking it couldn't get worse and suddenly finds this out. Aryll spreads the map of his territory on his desk and thinks that the former lord was a complete idiot and, therefore, He needs to look carefully at what options he would have at this moment. Errol is looking for something worthy there. Looking at the map more closely, Errol realizes that, as the population is small, there are many abandoned trees there. With that, Errol thinks that if he uses this to start making paper, it could be something good, as paper is something valuable there. Maybe it's an option he can try. However, Errol remembers that his previous products are still selling well, so he doesn't need to worry too much. He decides and says that's the plan. Now he needs to meet the people who live there. Errol has a small doubt, because if the former lord was an idiot, who is really in charge of the territory now? Errol shouts for all the village chiefs to be summoned. Errol emphasizes that everyone must come, and it has to be in person. After a few hours, the representatives arrive there. Errol is sitting in his chair and is impressed that everyone is really there. Looking at them, Errol notes that they were all quite strong. After all, they lived in this place where they had to hunt in this cold to survive. He thinks they are capable of killing 1 or 2 wolves with just their hands. They all bow and greet their new lord. After that, Errol begins to introduce himself to them, saying that his name is Errol Ernesia. He asks them to remember that name. Errol emphasizes that he hopes he can be a lord they can admire. Errol thinks that, clearly inside they can't believe it, because in their eyes, Errol was just a child with powers. However, Errol would not let them look down on him like that. So, he starts to say that he sees a young village chief there. Errol emphasizes that he ordered all the village chiefs to come in person. This leaves the young man a bit scared. The young man throws himself on the ground, saying that his father was the village chief until last year. But he passed away at the beginning of this year, and with that, he had inherited the position of chief earlier. Errol crosses his legs and says that's fine, but he already knew that from the documents he had read before. It's not that Errol wants to pick on any of them, but just to show that he is the one in charge there. Errol says that, anyway, he thinks they would have a long conversation, and clearly, it was quite cold on the way to the castle. So, Errol calls his maids and says they would talk while eating. People are impressed by this. Errol runs up to one of them with a smile on his face, thinking what people of lower status would hate most in the world. Clearly it was eating with a high-ranking person, that is, a meeting with the boss. Errol says it's all on him, so they don't need to hesitate to eat. They could ask for anything expensive to eat. Of course, he might end up with nothing to eat, but they don't need to worry about him. After that, the dining table was ready. Errol was sitting at the end of the table, smiling, thinking that this would be the worst meeting ever. Errol looks at the faces of his guests and notices that it's as if they were sitting on a cushion of thorns. Errol smiles and says they can relax a bit now. One of them shouts, saying they were very comfortable. Errol remembers that this situation was quite uncomfortable for him too. He even had to ask for help from Princess Kania to show how he should behave at a dinner like this. However, Kania just laughed, saying she couldn't get used to seeing him so serious like that. As soon as the chiefs start looking at their plates, they are impressed. Errol says he would like to offer them something better to eat, but it's not possible yet. So he asks them to have a little patience with him, but the chiefs shout that it's not a problem. They are grateful for the grace their new lord has provided them. Errol starts to drink and notices that they say no to almost everything he says while they eat. Errol thinks that, although it was a simple meal, he didn't serve it because of a lack of money. As the chiefs eat, they realize that the meat had salt. Errol thinks that their reaction is normal because salt there was something precious. Even more so, meat with salt. Errol thinks that although he is the lord of these lands, by eating the same as the village chiefs, he shows that everyone there is equal and has a level of friendship. Thus, it is clear that he is thinking of everyone there. Errol takes the opportunity to start saying that, apparently, the previous lord gave them all a hard life. He emphasizes that he knows how they feel, because if their leader is a complete idiot and follows only his ideas, the population suffers. Errol asks if they would be okay with that. Errol says that if everyone there continues doing what they are doing, in about 10 years this place will be completely ruined, because they are surviving somehow by hunting. Errol asks how long they can last with that. Errol emphasizes that from today he will start giving them various orders. There will be times when they won't understand them, so that's why he wants to warn them in advance. Errol finishes wiping his mouth, slams the table forcefully, stands up and shouts for everyone to just trust him no matter what happens. The chiefs were a bit confused, but they think that His Highness is right. The guards think that His Highness is justice. They start to see Errol as an angel, But he says that's not the case. It's as if everyone there is a fanatic for religion. Arl continues saying that anyway, it will be a big problem if they are dissatisfied with the orders they receive. If they follow them correctly, he will make sure that even the residents can eat like this. Arel claps to get everyone's attention and says he will state his first request. He knows they have already been notified, but he wants everyone to accept the residents he brought. The slaves should have been transferred to the villages. They were all freed to live with their families in the villages, and those who received education will work there perfectly. One of the chiefs says that the biggest problem in accepting them into the villages is that they wouldn't know if other residents would understand this situation. Arel thinks for a bit and really finds it will be difficult. Even though they are freed, the disgusting wall of status is hard to break. From the residents' point of view, they are even strangers. Arel tells them not to worry about it, as he is asking them to just accept them into the villages. With that, they would be rewarded with something else. Arel smiles in a strange way and says he hopes they have understood, as they have already received his sincerity. The village chiefs end up agreeing and saying they will do their best. Arel smiles and says that is really good to hear. After the end of the meeting and dinner, everyone starts to return to their villages. The young chief turns to another chief and asks if the former lords were like Arel. The other chief says that compared to the former lords, Arel was a bit strange, as most of the lords who were sent to that place never had any interest in the territory itself, since the place is practically a land of exile for them. The previous lord tried something, but because of his irrational orders, many residents died of starvation, and some of them were injured. But in this current situation, a new lord has come, a boy who has just had his coming-of-age ceremony. Moreover, he is the youngest prince of the royal family. How twisted can life be? The village chief says he doesn't know why the prince came there. At first, he just hoped that he wouldn't be as foolish as the other previous lords. However, after looking into his eyes today, the chief is sure of it. Now this boy is extraordinary. The young chief asks if they will finally be okay. The other chief replies that only time will answer that question. For now, they should try to put their trust in Lord Arel. Meanwhile, in his castle, Arel was lying on Seina's lap, looking at the papers she brought for him. Arel didn't seem very excited about what he was seeing and asks if that was really it. Seina starts to stroke his head, saying that he was looking at the documents that the servants had in their hands not long ago. Arel was acting like a baby. He replies that's exactly it, he needs to check something. Arel continues looking at the documents while Seina kept stroking him. He says that when he took over, the total population was about 10,000 people. However now, when he looked again, there are only 9,651 people. Including the villagers he brought, there should be about 9,800 people. Seina now massages Arel's hand and says that, indeed, compared to the time she lived there, the population had decreased. Arel says that certainly, considering the blank period before taking over the position of the former lord, it's true that the population is declining. The number of newborns is also terribly low. As expected, poverty is the biggest problem of these lands. Seina continues to massage Arel's hands while he closes his eyes and thinks that, from the money he had earned so far, he could invest is about 450,000 euros. If he keeps the situation as it is, he thinks they could last about 50 years. Arel thinks he's in a mud puddle up to his waist. He gets annoyed because the nobles of the family wanted to leave him rotting there for half his life. Clearly, they were trying to kill him by pushing this muddy economic situation onto him. Arel thinks again about what he could do there. He tells Seina that it would be very good to do agricultural work there, but she starts saying it's impossible. The former lord went bankrupt precisely because of this, shortly after promoting agriculture. Arel continues thinking and says that the former lord really was not a normal person. He thinks again and closes his eyes. Arel thinks that agriculture is limited to self-sufficiency. In the end, trade using specialties must be the only solution. Suddenly, Arel stands up shouting that he had some plans, but now they would need to hurry to prepare the ground for him to execute his plan. Seina is happy with this and claps for him. With that, Arel and Asha go out for a walk in the snow and cold. Arel thinks that, first of all, they would need to have a road to facilitate everything. He tries to imagine what it would be like to walk there with carts. He is worried because the soil is unstable due to frequent snow and poorly maintained roads. A merchant could easily have an accident going there. Some village chiefs receive the road construction plan from Fahilia and are amazed. After reading, the chief says that, from what he understood, Arel was hiring and would pay a fair wage. The chief says that if you take into account what he said the other day too, The chief asks if they should try, since the Lord would take care of the construction cost. However, the rest of the villagers did not exactly know what to answer in this case. However, after a few minutes, they decide to look at the construction site to see what it would be like. As soon as they get there, they are amazed, as there are several people working there and materials arriving from all over. As they looked at all this, a person was talking to Lord Arel. The man points out that this work would be quite large, and therefore they should follow the plan very well. Arel crosses his arms and says that it's not a problem if it takes longer than planned. Arel asks them not to worry. He would pay whatever they want. After Arel says this, the workers are extremely happy. Arel smiles and says that, as always, money changes the world. With that, everyone continues working, each in the way they could. Arel puts on glasses and a fur coat, crosses his arms and smiles. Beside him were Sena and Asha. He thought it was really good the way everyone is working hard and together. It can't get better than this. After some time, Arel looks at the ready road and thinks that if a person wants to eat, they need to work. This is the truth of the world. He laughs, as he was happy with the result of the road. Arel turns to the workers and smiles, saying it was excellent work. With that, the carts could walk there quietly. He shouts, saying that now they should plow the rest of the lands. The workers celebrate and say they would go immediately. Arel went to meet a market owner. The guy says that the establishment of a trading company in other places might be, but in Fahilia, it's a bit difficult. Arel grabs him by the shirt and tells him to just shut up and do it without complaining. The man starts to tremble and says he would do it. Things started to flow. Arel thinks that for now, the main items of exchange are the daily necessities that the residents there need. A woman goes to the store and is impressed. Another woman is also very happy with the size of the furs they had there. Arel continues to analyze the situation and thinks that if he gives orders from the trading company he manages, not only the residents but also the peddlers can appear there to actively negotiate. And with that, he could create the basic trade route and finally reached the last step to save the ruined territory. Arel throws a bunch of papers under the table. Damon picks up all the papers from the table and is amazed. He asks if Arel was really thinking of making paper. Arel smiles and thinks that's exactly it. Paper exists in that world. It is also a low-quality paper, made simply by steaming and weaving fibers. However, even so, it was imported from a foreign country because no one in the kingdom knew how to make it. But thanks to that, it is incredibly expensive to acquire it, so only those with high status can use it. The only place Arel remembers having seen it was in the royal library. However, even in the royal library, most people use parchment paper, unless it is absolutely necessary to use paper. Damon says that paper really is something very valuable. If they can mass produce it, they would have a gold mine in their hands. However, he points out that there is a big problem. No one there knew how paper is made. Damon asks Arel if, by any chance, he knew about it. Arel puts both hands on the table and starts to smile. He looks at Damon and asks him if he, Lord Arel, didn't know that. He wouldn't even touch on the subject, right? Damon is happy to know this and says that this was expected of His Highness. Damon asks Arel if the competitors would stand still. Arel lowers his head and tells Damon not to worry about it, because the way of preparation and quality would be completely different. Damon could say that it is even a different product. Arel starts to open his drawer and says that, as much as he knows all the steps to make it, he would still need this equipment to be able to execute the plan perfectly. He takes a paper from the drawer where the whole plan of a machine is. After Arel hands it to Damon, he asks what Damon thought of the plan. Damon analyzes the machine a bit and says that it really is an impeccable piece of equipment, but he thinks he wouldn't be able to do it alone. Damon points out that, if it's a necessary remedy, they could try to solve it, no matter what remedy it was. But the development of machines is a completely different matter. Even the blacksmiths who lived there would not be able to make this type of equipment easily. Damon says that, even with all this, there was still one thing. This catches Arel's attention, who asks what it would be. Damon starts to say that if they were the dwarves of the royal capital, definitely the production of this machine would be possible. After hearing this tip, Arel starts to think a bit about the matter, and as far as he knows, the dwarves set up a forge in the royal capital and receive commissions with it. They say they can make anything, no matter how precise and sophisticated it is, they would still be able to make it. After thinking about all this, Arel shouts that it's all right, because spending money is what he knows best. He would take the gold immediately. However, Damon shouts for Arel to wait a moment. He holds Arel by the shoulders and shouts, saying that the dwarves are not like that. If Arel simply got there with money and tried to buy them, they would not accept that kind of thing, so the whole plan would be thrown away. Arel is confused and asks if the dwarves don't like money. Damon explains that, because of the dwarves' pride, instead of money, they prefer orders that bring out the soul of the master craftsman. Arel throws the bags of gold to his butler and asks him to keep them and asks what that means. Damon closes his eyes and explains that if it is not to their liking, even if it is a request from a noble, they will never accept it. Arel starts to think a bit and believes that this is because they are a race full of craftsmen from birth. That's why instead of a high salary, they think that the chance to use their techniques is more rewarding. Arel thinks that this is the perfect condition to starve to death. Damon says he has contact with a dwarf. He would get in touch with him and try to solve this. Arel is very excited and says that this is a great idea. They should do it. Damon says that if they show this project, he is sure that the dwarves would be interested. Arel says that's great, and because of that, he would give the letter with the details of the machine with Damon. After a few days, in the dwarves' forge, iron factory, the dwarves were working hard. One of them shouts that he didn't want to see laziness there, because if they hadn't made progress today, tomorrow's work would be doubled. The dwarves there are scared by this and start working more. Suddenly, the messenger arrives and calls their chief, saying he had a letter for him. The chief asks what kind of letter it is and if it's from the damned royal family again. The dwarves' chief yells, saying that he had recently given them a sword made especially for a child who is a prince or something. The chief emphasizes that he is full of orders until next year, so he wouldn't be able to accept more orders. This chief is named Akin. He goes to the messenger and asks what kind of stupid order they wanted now. The messenger says it's not quite that. The sender is the alchemist who had been there 10 years ago. Akin asks if it's from Damon, that boy. With that in mind, Akin takes the letter and sees that it's from Fahelia. He asks what Damon did to be thrown into such a bad place as that. Akin thinks he doesn't even need to read the letter to know it was something useless. As soon as Akin starts reading the letter, he falls silent for a while. The messenger notices this and calls his master, asking if everything is okay. Akin asks the messenger named Ben if he could take command of the others for a while. This scares Ben, but he agrees, even without understanding the reason. Akin's eyes were wide. He starts to leave and says he would return as soon as he talked to the others. Ben, still not understanding, starts to wonder what could be in the letter to do this to Akin, as he didn't seem normal. What could be written in the letter that made him change drastically in seconds? Meanwhile, in another room, several dwarves were gathering. Everyone sat at the table with their drinks. The dwarves were questioning what was so urgent that Akin had called them all there, as they were full of work to do. In total, there were 35 blacksmiths there. After so many complaints, Akin takes the scroll in his hands and starts to explain. He says it's nothing much. A boy sent a blueprint that he had drawn himself and asked them to make some equipment in Fahelia. One of the dwarves smiles and says that this boy is really bold, but he still didn't see the need to have called them all just to say that. Akin looks at them and says it really seems ridiculous. He himself had thought that at the beginning. Akin asks everyone to take a look at the project and opens the letter on the table. Everyone starts looking closely at the project made by Arel. All the dwarves started to sweat seeing the project. One of them asks if it's some kind of joke. Akin says that it's really what they are seeing. This project is for a paper-making machine. Akin asks if they remember what happened 5 years ago, a boy from the east who said he wanted to make high-quality paper. One of the dwarves lowers his head and says they could remember perfectly. In the end, the dwarves couldn't meet the expectations with their skills, and that was the greatest humiliation and shame they felt. Because of that, he himself almost threw his hammer away. Akin stands up and raises the paper high, saying that someone in Fahelia just presented ideas and technologies that they couldn't even dream of reaching 5 years ago, and best of all, he's asking for help, asking them to send workers. The dwarves get a little irritated with this. Akin sighs and sits down again, and says that since no one else wants to do it, then he would go alone. The dwarves tell Akin to stop talking nonsense. They ask Akin if he doesn't have too much work to do. Akin says that his disciples could take care of everything. He emphasizes that he would be the only one going, and that there wouldn't be enough workers in that case. Everyone is silent for a while, and suddenly everyone starts shouting that they would also go and even fight to see who would really go. Akin sits holding the scroll in his hand and looks at everyone while thinking that, as he expected, they can't hide their excitement. They must have been intrigued by the project. After a while, Akin shouts for everyone to stop and be quiet, as it was not possible for all of them to go. If everyone went, the forge would be closed. Aiken emphasizes that only half of the team could go on the trip. The other half had to stay so they could deliver all the orders without delay. However, everyone offers to travel again, and this starts to cause another tension between them. Aiken sighs again and says there's no way around it. They would have to decide with that. The dwarves stop and start saying that really that is the best way, and the only way to solve the problem. Suddenly, Ben goes to the meeting room and opens the door, asking Aachen if he could clear up a small doubt. However, as soon as Ben looks into the room, he sees all the dwarves inside brawling. When dwarves don't agree on something, they decide fairly by brawling. That's the iron rule of the dwarves who have been running this forge for many years. Ben just closes the door. A bottle hits the door, almost hitting him. Ben says it's always the same. He would just leave there. Meanwhile, in Arel's palace, he was lying in a chair, saying that it would take at least 5 days for the dwarves to send a response. He wonders what he should do until then. Then, he gets up from the chair and jumps on the bed, saying there's nothing better than just doing nothing. He covers himself and rolls around in his bed, saying that there would be no work for a few days, so he should rest until then. He says he would start by taking a nap, even drooling. Suddenly he hears a very loud noise that almost scares him to death. Arel gets up all wrapped in his blanket and realizes that the noise is Fly. He asks since when Fly became so noisy. He shouts that this is harassment. He looks out the window and sees Fly upside down. He asks what he was doing there. As soon as the sleepiness passes, Arel gets worried because he just saw Fly there. This shouldn't happen, as this creature can definitely fly, but there's no way it could reach that speed. Not to mention the most important thing, this place is too high for a baby griffin to fly. Fly was falling uncontrollably, but outside was Princess Kanya, waiting to catch him. As soon as he falls, she manages to hold him. Fly was completely scared of this. Kanya asks him why he couldn't fly higher. She says she would help him. Fly was trembling and crying. She starts spinning with him too fast, and then throws him up very high. Arel goes outside and asks her what she was doing. He asks if Fly did something wrong to her, like touching her dress. Kanya turns around and asks what Arel was saying, as it wasn't anything like that. However, when she turned to talk to him, Fly goes straight past and falls to the ground, creating a small hole and getting a bit hurt. Arel says that if there's nothing wrong, why was she intimidating Fly? She screams that it was a misunderstanding. She kneels down and starts cleaning Fly, but the poor thing was all hurt. She says she was just giving him a little training. There was no reason for her to pick on him. Arel is not pleased at all and says that this is not training. Since the beginning of the transition of functions, Kanya was the only one who was free, while everyone else was working. Kanya's daily routine was to eat, train in fencing, sleep, and so her days went. For someone who can't stay in one place, when she started fighting against boredom, she saw Fly playing in the garden. Right at that moment, Fly's misfortune began. Kanya turns to Arel and says that Fly would become a beast in the future, but he was still too slow. What should they do about it? Arel asks if that's why she was doing this to Fly. She says that's exactly it, and asks if he understood now. Arel puts his hand on his face and says it would have been better if he had taught her common sense and not fencing. Fly agrees with this. Arel thinks he could use these free days to spend more time with Kanya, as everyone was busy, even he was full of work. However, he would have a few free days until the dwarves responded. Arel begins to wonder what siblings usually do for fun. He tries to remember his first life, but remembers that he was an only child. Arel says that he had blood relatives who could be called brothers in all his past lives so far, but their relationship was not very good. It was quite normal for them never to talk to each other. Arel thinks that a former professional like him doesn't know what to do at this moment. He takes Fly from Kanya's hand, leaving her surprised. He releases Fly, shouting for him to be free. She gets angry, yelling at both of them. She asks Arel why he had done that. He says he just saved a poor griffin. Fly was so happy that he even cried for being finally free. Kanya was mad about this. Arel thinks that now he would be an exemplary younger brother in this life. He starts to say that, since Fly was no longer there, they could have fun together today. They start playing chess. Kanya makes her move. Arel makes his. After a few moves, Arel wins the game. Kanya is a bit frustrated with this. She throws everything up, shouting that she couldn't do this kind of thing. Arel is scared by this, as one of the pieces hit his face. He thinks he never imagined he would see someone flipping a chessboard in person. Kanya was crying at the table, shouting that she couldn't continue doing this because it all made her very restless. She screamed that Arel didn't help because he didn't make it easy for her to win at anything. Arel starts to approach her, thinking he had thought of this game so they wouldn't have to go out in the cold. However, he thinks she can't continue like this, bored. He tells her that he understands how she's feeling, so he would give her a small advantage. She stops crying and asks what advantage that would be. Aurel hands her a necklace with a magical artifact that can enhance a person's intellectual potential. He tells her that with this, she will be able to think faster than before. She is surprised by this and stares at the necklace in her hand. Aurel thinks that, as he is a professional from past lives, his experience in chess is 100 times better than that of ordinary people. It's a fact that he should give her an advantage. With this, they start playing again. But Kanya starts having trouble again, because she wasn't able to keep up with Aurel. The necklace starts to take effect and glow, but it begins to crack. Aurel is scared by this because the necklace was really breaking because the mana circuit exploded. Kanya starts to tremble again while Aurel just stares at her. She starts to grab her sword with a very angry face. She screams that she had warned that she couldn't do this. She cuts the chessboard into 4 parts while screaming in anger. Aurel just looks at all this without saying anything. One of the parts of the board hits Aurel's head. He just thought that this chessboard was a masterpiece that he had made. Kanya starts screaming again, asking what they were going to do now because, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to play chess anymore. He looks at her annoyed, saying that they really wouldn't be able to play anymore since she had cut it into pieces. Aurel turns around not knowing what to do. He thinks he doesn't know how to play with a sister like this. He really didn't want to leave the house in this cold. But Kanya was full of energy, just looking at him from behind. He turns to her and asks what she usually does for fun. She smiles and says she trains and trains and trains some more. Aurel starts to remember the early years of his life and says this was driving him crazy because he hadn't done anything but rest. He lowers his head and thinks that his sister is completely the opposite of him. He wants to stay inside doing calmer things a little bit, while she wants to go out and explore anything she can. He wonders if there really is anything in common between them. Suddenly, both of their stomachs make noise because they were hungry. He says that for now they just need to eat. But he has a great idea and asks if she wanted to cook with him, if she had time. However, she starts trembling again and asks why cook. Aurel says they had time and it's also a great opportunity. Princess Kanya sighs and asks if there was any need for it, but the truth is she didn't know how to cook. Aurel crosses his arms and sighs. He asks if she really wants to become a knight, because if the answer is yes, then she needs to at least know how to make some simple dishes. He starts to explain that since ancient times, a knight is not just a guard or squire. Many other incidents are bound to happen during expeditions to fight monsters. Aurel emphasizes that a person can hold on for a week or more, but no one can endure an entire expedition without eating anything. It's impossible. However, if the person eats anything they find, there is a possibility of the person ending up dying from food poisoning. Aurel shouts and points his finger at Kanya, saying that's why cooking is an indispensable virtue of a knight. There are many important reasons that will make her learn. She realizes that this makes sense, so she is speechless. She runs to the corner of the room, pretending to cry, and says she had understood everything. Aurel smiles and says she doesn't need to worry too much about it, as he would help her with everything. In the kitchen, Aurel thinks that teaching his older sister to cook on his day off is something a brother would do. The two were already wearing aprons and in the middle of the kitchen. Aurel turns to Kanya and asks if she was ready. She says yes, so he starts to explain what they were going to make today. The name of the dish is stew. Stew is a simple dish, made by adding meat or vegetables in moderation and boiling. It is also the most frequent menu at the camp, and most importantly, it is a dish that has the least possibility of failing. Even knowing this, Aurel still couldn't help but think of the two of them lying on the floor from food poisoning. While Princess Kanya was cutting the vegetables, Aurel was watching everything closely. He tells Kanya that she is really good at using the knife. She makes a smug face and says it's nothing. After she finishes cutting and peeling all the ingredients, Aurel tells her to put them all gently into a pot of boiling water. Then she starts to put all the ingredients in there calmly. After that, he tells her to season in moderation. She starts to put the seasonings very carefully. After that, they just had to wait a bit until the ingredients were boiled. The two were sitting at the table, and they start to smell something good coming from the pot. They go to take a look, and as soon as they look inside, they see that it's all ready. The smell and the look are mouth-watering. This is Aurel and Kanya's stew. As soon as the two finish serving themselves, Princess Kanya sits at the table to try it. As soon as she eats, she starts to smile, saying it's really wonderful, and asks Aurel what he thought. Aurel says it was really wonderful. He had been worried because it had been a while since he had made a stew, but everything turned out fine in the end. As soon as Princess Kanya hears this, she is amazed, because in addition to Lord Arel being very young, he was even younger than her. So how long ago had he already done this? Arel smiles and says he didn't do much there. All the work was Kanya's. So no one will be able to say that she doesn't know how to cook from now on. While he was eating, he thought that with this, his mission to play with his sister was completed. When they finish eating, he will recover the nap he had lost earlier. Kanya thanks him for the words he had said to her, but suddenly a man runs into the kitchen shouting for Arel. His clothes were all destroyed. He shouts, saying they were in trouble. Arel is worried about this. He even spit out the soup. He thinks he had told no one to bother him today. If someone disobeyed his orders, it must be something serious. Arel quickly stands up and slams the table, asking what had happened. The man screams that a group of dwarves had arrived there. Arel doesn't understand this and asks what he meant. The man, crying, says it's the dwarves. They are outside, holding various tools and threatening to kill him if he doesn't call the Lord immediately. Arel stops responding while the man was still shaking him and screaming, begging for him to save him. Arel thought those dwarves were there. It seems his day off had come to an end. Back in his office, Arel sits in his chair with his hand on his head, wondering what's wrong with these people who don't have common sense. It's not right to receive a letter and come running to the person's house. The right thing is to respond to a letter first and then proceed according to the procedure. Arel says he really didn't imagine they would come so quickly. For now, he should show them dignity and receive them as the Lord. Arel begins to say that it's really wonderful to see them there so excited. Probably all of them were from the blacksmith factory, but Aiken interrupts him and asks who was the boy who drew that. Immediately, Asha starts to move her spear quickly, placing it between Arel and Aachen. She turns to him and says that was extremely rude of him, and therefore, he should apologize to the Lord immediately. Aachen turns to her and says that for a girl, she has a lot of courage. Immediately, Asha gets angry and asks what he had just said. Arel realizes that Asha was about to kill him, so he starts to ask her to restrain herself, as Damon had warned that they were like that. For reference, dwarves understood the human status system, but they simply didn't care about it. Even with the king, they spoke like this, saying that if the king shortened the delivery deadline again, he would die, and they still called him a stupid bastard. They say that the greater the craftsmanship skill of a dwarf, the ruder they are. Arel says that since they are different races, they should treat them accordingly. Asha calms down and says that if the Lord is saying so, then it's okay. Arel thinks he needs to end this conversation as soon as possible, because if it starts to get out of control, Asha would skin all the dwarves alive. Arel says that it was he who drew it and asks what's wrong. Aiken asks if that's really serious. Arel says that's what he said. Aiken says he can't believe it and says that the Lord was hiding the real craftsman somewhere. Arel stands up and hits his chest, saying that the craftsman is himself. How many times should he still say it for them to understand that? Aiken starts to say that a child who seems not to be able to lift a hammer would not be capable of that. Aiken asks Arel to at least say something that makes sense. Arel gets a little irritated with this and asks Asha to quickly cut that vagabond dwarf. She takes the lead and says she was waiting for that. Arel thinks that tonight's dinner would have dwarf sashimi. In the end, the butlers managed to stop Arel and Asha. After they calm down, Aiken puts the project on the table and asks once again if it was really Arel who had made that drawing. Arel shouts once again that was exactly what he said. It's not possible that he has to repeat this more times. Arel asks if they understood that they are repeating the same thing several times. Arel gets irritated again and asks why everyone was there. Suddenly he tells Aachen that if he had sent a letter, he would have received everyone in a better place. Aiken says that kind of talk disgusts him. Arel continues to be surprised by the temperament of the dwarves. Aiken leans on the table and says that, anyway, from what he read in the letter, Arel was wanting to order that machine that was in the project. Arel replies that's exactly it. They didn't have any skilled blacksmith to be able to make that. Aiken says that, anyway, it's impossible to make those pieces with human hands. Arel looks at this and thinks that Aachen was saying this as if it were a certain gift. He wonders if this is the pride of the dwarves. Arel thinks it was important for him to have listened to Damon's advice.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.